Hello, Topical, and welcome back to your favorite NBA coverage, where me and my good friend Aradh Faruqi are going to break down everything that happened in the past week and a half this time of the NBA. I was worried that we wouldn't have enough to talk about, but we got a whole extra half week, so frankly, that'd be embarrassing if we couldn't make it a whole 3 hours.
Yep, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start this off like I always do. What games have you watched since we last talked, Aradh?
Actually, Ryan, would you mind talking to the crowd for just a second? I have to take a phone call.
Oh, yeah, sure thing.
Yeah.
Dang, 30 seconds in. Okay, so just to give you a little preview for what we're going to be talking about today, I did a little brainstorming because, after last week, I had absolutely nothing left on the table. So stuff I came up with, we're going to conclude our conversation on where NBA franchises should be relocated or expanded to, with looking at if NBA Europe would make any sense. If referees should be making fewer calls at the end of games, if the college 3-point shot should be the same distance as the NBA one, if a 4-point shot would work in the NBA, what we think of the Tim Donaghy scandal, and if it's really even matters that much. What we think about the recent thing with Darius Baisley choosing to the G League over the college basketball, and if more players should be choosing to do that to avoid the one and done rule. What we think about gambling in sports, and if it should be allowed in all places like the NBA wants. How Embiid nearly made it to the NBA season. He suffered a facial contusion last night, or maybe 2 nights ago. I don't know. I didn't look at the actual dates. And what that'll mean for the rest of his career. And then what we think about this crazy road streak that I noticed that the Nuggets are on, 7 road games in 15 days, and how the NBA schedule should be set up and formulated to avoid things like this happening.
I'm back, Ryan, by the way.
Brilliant timing.
Yes.
Okay,
uh,
so let's
I
get.
was able to hear some of the things that you were talking about. Yeah, I think all of those are pretty interesting topics. But back to your question right before I left. Games I watched this week. So I watched Cleveland play the Hornets last night. I watched them play the Heat the night before. I watched them play the Nets last Sunday. I watched a little bit of the Rockets Pelicans game last week, and I caught some of the Utah and Celtics game last night.
Okay.
So, yeah. Basically, what I noted from all of them, Cleveland I think is definitely playing much better since Kevin Love has been back. They went on a 5-game winning streak, and I mean they've been playing better, but obviously they still have all their ups and downs, I guess, because reintegrating Kevin Love is difficult for Rodney Hood, George Hill, some of their complementary pieces because they've never played with them before, but. Overall, they're looking better. They're looking more motivated for the playoffs, except for that one game against the Heat. They only scored 78 points or 79 points, and they lost by 19. And Dwayne Wade had 2 really nice blocks on LeBron James, but it was a cool moment. Overall, I mean, and Kevin Love actually he took an elbow to the face in that game, so he only played about 7 minutes. So I think that was fine. I mean, LeBron was kind of playing with a bunch of no ones, so. Or I guess I shouldn't say a bunch of no ones because those players are still pretty good, but he didn't really get that much production from anyone. He was kind of carrying the entire thing, and I guess he was just a little bit tired because he only scored 18. But overall, I mean, they've been playing much better last night. I mean, LeBron responded very well last night. He had 41 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, beating the Hornets by 13. So my main concern with this team is just their inconsistency on defense, mainly, because obviously consistency on offense kind of comes and goes. For every team has like maybe one game every like 15 games where they where they lay an egg on offense. I'm just more concerned that as to whether or not they can ratchet it up defensively because I know a lot of people like Cleveland supporters and all those LeBron fans in general kind of just think that when the playoffs come. He can just kind of elevate his level to becoming like the best perimeter defender and one of the best post defenders in the NBA. The only reason I'm concerned about that this year is because it doesn't really. I mean, he's obviously in still amazing physical condition. I just feel like he can't really be as good as a defender as he's been in past years simply because of how much faster the game is, and for him to have to defend at a high enough level. I think LeBron James historically has always been a better defender in transition than he has, I guess, one on one. Simply because, well, one, it's more difficult to lock someone up one on one, but also, obviously LeBron is known for the chase down block and all that. So him having to play both sides of the court will require a lot of physical exertion for him. So I'm a little bit concerned because he's going to have to do more offensively than in years prior without Kyrie Irving or Dwayne Wade or Chris Bosh. So I think it might be a little bit difficult for him to become a complete two-way player in the playoffs, but hopefully he can prove me wrong.
Yeah, definitely, and it's gonna be a lot more interesting this year because most years he doesn't have to worry about the first round, and he can coast through that just like he is for the last month or so of the season. But
Yeah,
this year he's gonna have to face either the 76ers or the Pacers or the Wizards, and none of those are pushovers. Those are teams that you would usually expect to face in the second round, and it seems
yeah,
like he's gonna have much higher competition going through the Eastern Conference playoffs, and I'm beyond excited for that because this is gonna be our last podcast where we can get away with not talking about only the playoffs. Because I believe the next one we're doing is gonna be heading right into like the last game or so of the NBA season.
yeah. And I mean, I think another interesting thing that you addressed just now, I really do. I don't understand really why there's such a negative view of the Eastern Conference relative to the West. Maybe it's because of the top teams, but when you look at it from from 8 through 3, like the conferences are relatively the same. Like I think the 76ers are probably just about as good as, Minnesota or I guess not even maybe even higher. Like, I would compare like probably like if you're going conference to conference, like the Jazz and the Bucks, I don't see that much difference aside from, the like Giannis, despite whatever people think about him, is still obviously clearly a better player at this point than Donovan Mitchell is, and Rudy Gobert obviously is on the Jazz, but the depth of Milwaukee and their length, they have Thon Maker, Chris Middleton, Jason Terry. He's not long, but he can shoot.
Yeah.
Malcolm Brogdon. The Bucks are a really gritty, good defensive team. I think so. They're about right there. I think they'd probably be an 8 seed if they were in the West as well. Minnesota, you could compare to another team. I guess really the only two teams in the Western Conference that you can't really compare to an Eastern Conference team, I guess, would be the Warriors and the Rockets. But you can't even really say that about the Warriors this season because the Raptors, I think, at this point have a better record than the Warriors do. So, um, you know, and I feel like if the Raptors were in the Western Conference, they probably wouldn't be a 60-win team, but they could still probably be somewhere around like 56 to 58 or something like that. So I don't really understand why there's so much talking about how like the West is so much more difficult. I'm not. Maybe it's because like seeds 3 through 10 are still only separated by like 3 or so games. But I mean, I think that's just sort of more about like how well you play rather than how good all of the teams are. Because like when you look at it, I really don't think the Clippers should be looking to make the playoffs. I think that the Clippers should probably be sitting around the 10th seed. Their best player, I guess, is Lou Williams, and no disrespect for Lou Williams, obviously, but he's not the same caliber player as all the all the best players in the Eastern Conference and his own conference for that matter.
Yeah, certainly, and I think a lot of it had to do with just preseason projections and seeing all those players leave the East. Paul George,
Yeah,
Gordon Hayward being like the only guy that went to the East from the West, and like just an expectation that it was going to be completely talent dry. But the biggest thing has been a ton of young players have stepped up in the East. This year, you have an entire 76ers team stepping up with Ben Simmons and Embiid continuing his great play, and now Markel Fultz finally coming back for them. You have the Celtics getting Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to have great production. Obviously, the Raptors having a fantastic bench that's mostly comprised of young players. Oladipo, who's not really young anymore, he's finally taken the next step, and Domantas Sabonis finally living up to his last name. And then,
yeah,
and obviously the Heat just keeping things going. But yeah, it just seems like the bottom tier of the Eastern Conference playoffs has finally become something that you can actually look at as a contending thing, even if the seeds like 9 through 12 or whatever it is, it's all tanking teams. But same can be said about the West right now, outside of the Clippers.
and I mean, I think they like I hear people say a lot of people like this is in regards to LeBron again, but people say that LeBron would not want to. He doesn't want to go to the Western Conference because then his whole thing about like his consecutive final run would be over. and they say that that's such a big deal in terms of because the East is so much weaker than the West, but that's not necessarily true. I feel like it would end up being like he probably wouldn't make that many straight finals because eventually he would run into either Houston or Golden State or something like that. But I mean, in terms of like the first two rounds, like he would still be getting to the conference finals at least every year. So um, I don't really buy the whole despair. I understand what you're saying about preseason projections. Like obviously, Paul Millsap going to the like, but like I just heard some ridiculous things. Like it would take 50 wins to get the 8th seed in the West, which I mean, that's not going to be the case. It's going to be like 43, I think. So
Yeah, that was always absurd. And even if you look at it in past seasons, there was absolutely no precedent for that. I think like 2 years ago, the Pelicans were like maybe 3 years ago, the Pelicans were like a 48 win team in the 8th seed. But
I
like
think like the last time that it was actually crazy, I think 2009, which was 9 seasons ago, or 9 years ago, but 10 seasons ago. That 8th seed that year was indeed a 50-win team, but since then it really hasn't been that astronomically ridiculous. I mean, like, and I don't really like another thing. This is just a pet peeve of mine, but people always like to talk about how like LeBron didn't like the level of competition when LeBron made the finals was much worse than Michael Jordan.
uh,
But people don't understand that when Michael Jordan, his first 2 years in the league, or his second year in the league, his team made the playoffs and only won 34 games, I think.
yeah,
Like, I mean, and LeBron won 42 games his second year and didn't make the playoffs. So like that's just something that annoys me. Like the East has like people are overstating it now. How much like there's no level of competition. Like there's still definitely like teams are even. Like I think that's what's more important. Like rather than what's what. Like the teams are essentially like every team that another team is going to play is going to be like every series in like each conference, both series, like every series in each conference is going to be competitive. Like except for maybe like aside from maybe the the Rockets if they end up playing Denver, like that probably won't be that competitive. But even so, like I say that, but even so, I could see Denver getting a game off of them.
especially at
Denver's
home.
historically Denver's a difficult place to play in because of the altitude change and everything. People talk about that all the time. And even Toronto, like if Toronto ends up playing Milwaukee in the first round, like I mean, I would not be surprised if that series went 6 games. So
Yeah, especially just based in the past couple of years where we've had the
yeah,
Raptors,
exactly. For the
Bucks.
Raptors in general, like the Raptors can't beat anybody. Like they went 7 games. Like to get to the conference finals against LeBron, they played 7-14-6. They played 20 games and they lost in the conference finals.
Yeah, which is absolutely crazy. That's like that Heat team that did 7 games against the Hornets, and then was it 7 games against the Raptors actually that year?
Which year? Who was there?
Where the Eastern Conference, the 3 through 6 seeds were all at the same record, and they had to go to tiebreakers.
Was this what do you know what year this was? Like in terms
I
of like
think it
who was
was
on the
two.
team?
I think it was 2 years ago, but I always mix up if it was 2 or 3.
Oh, you mean 2016?
Yeah,
Um, you're talking about the who the Cavs played or who the Heat played?
yeah. I'm talking about the Heat that year.
Oh yeah. The Heat played. They played 7 games against
The
um,
Hornets, yeah.
the Hornets, and then they played 7 games against Toronto. Yes, that was the same year.
Yeah, okay.
And then in Game 7, they lost to Toronto barely. But that was sort of that loss was. I mean, I was really rooting for the Heat to win because I would have loved to see LeBron play Dwayne Wade in the conference finals. I think that would have been really cool. Just from a fan perspective. But yeah, that was the same year. 3 through 6 were all essentially the same.
Yeah, and I think that Heat Cavaliers game that we just saw that really proved that would have been a fantastic matchup with Dwayne Wade blocking everything LeBron was putting up.
See, yeah, I think the interesting thing. I don't know what it is, but I mean, I don't like every time I watch LeBron play the Heat, he seems like he holds back. Like I'm not sure why, but it's like the Heat is like his most like they're his least productive like opponent on the road. Like he for some reason every time he goes down there, I mean like and I saw some speculating that it's because he doesn't like he really doesn't want to like he doesn't really want to do that to Dwayne Wade. Like he doesn't want to completely outperform Dwayne Wade because I guess he feels indebted to Dwayne Wade for everything that he did for him. But I mean, it's a strange thing. Like I mean, I feel like in a playoff series, honestly, like if LeBron was disengaged or the team overall just had like two absolutely atrocious defensive games, which is completely possible with the way they're playing defense now. Like I really feel like the Heat probably could beat them in the second round, maybe like if everything is clicking and they get Hassan Whiteside back, and then obviously Eric Spoelstra is a much better coach than Tyronn Lue.
Yeah.
Nobody would individually outplay LeBron, but literally like 12 guys, like the 12 guys on the other team would completely outplay the other 11 guys on LeBron's team, aside from maybe Kevin Love, but he's shaky, so.
Yeah, especially shaky. I don't even know if he can walk straight after that hit.
Yeah, his poor guy. But it is what it is. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the playoffs because like I really feel like I don't feel like this is Golden State's year. And to me, like that makes this year much more exciting because like this sounds ridiculous to say like out loud, but I really feel like Cleveland's chances to win the championship this year are higher than Golden State's because like when you look at just historically, when you look at dynasties and teams that go consecutively, there have only ever been four teams that have ever went to 4 straight NBA finals. And it's LeBron's Heat, and then it's Bill Russell Celtics, Larry Bird Celtics, and Magic Johnson Showtime Lakers. Those are the only 4 teams that have been to 4 consecutive finals. Not won 4 straight, but been to 4 straight. No other team has done that. LeBron, if he makes it to the finals this year, will have done it twice. He'll be the only player to have done it twice. And he'll be obviously, But like Golden State, they won't have Steph Curry in the first round. I think we've all I'm not sure if I told you that statistic about how the Warriors play and Kevin Durant's play specifically falter a lot when Steph Curry is not playing.
I actually saw a 538 article on that this week about, like it's a massive drop-off in terms of points per 100 possessions.
Yeah. Their point differential without Steph Curry, they only win by 3 points, and then with Steph Curry, they win by 15 points. Without Steph Curry, they play at the 3rd slowest pace in the league. With Steph Curry, they play at the fastest pace in the league. With Steph Curry, they average about 121 points per game. Or 121 points per 100 possessions, and then without Steph Curry, they average about 104, 105. And then I told you about how Kevin Durant has played, like in his entire career, he's played about 1 full season without Russell Westbrook and Steph Curry, just in terms of how many games that those two have missed. And in those games, rather than being what he had hit this season, he's a 54% shooter from the field and then a 38% shooter from 3. But then without those two, historically in his career, he's about a 45% shooter from the field and a 35% shooter from 3. So I feel like if Kevin Durant and the Warriors this year, because they're not going to have Steph Curry in the first round, and honestly, it could be longer than that because, you never know with Steph Curry's MCL. Like it takes, you never know what can happen with him. He is at this point a little bit injury prone. I hate to say it, but he definitely is. So if they end up playing in the first round, like let's say that Minnesota stays at the 7th seed, right?
Yeah.
If Minnesota stays at the 7th seed, they get Jimmy Butler back. Kevin Durant is not going to have his typical, scoring outpour like against Jimmy Butler defending him.
Yeah,
it just happened. Jimmy Butler, I would argue, is the third, or either the second or third best perimeter defender in the league after whatever you like between Kawhi Leonard when he's healthy and Paul George. Second definitely. Or third. I think Kawhi is definitely the best, but after that, there's no one better than him. So he is going to give Kevin Durant a lot of. He's stronger than Kevin Durant. He's not as long, but he's 6'8". I mean, he has a long wingspan, so he's going to be able to do a lot of disrupting. And then obviously the Warriors, their one weakness is that they never have anybody who can contain a big man like Anthony Davis, Boogie Cousins, and Karl Anthony Towns, who just dropped 56 points, 15 rebounds, hit 6 threes, and had 4 assists against the Hawks last night. So Karl Anthony Towns is not hitting any sort of wall. He's playing much better.
Yeah.
And he's played extremely well with Jimmy Butler all year. He's found a really, really good role. Like him and Jimmy are very well balanced. They both score about 22 points a game. And then, Jimmy Butler does his typical thing, giving you about 6 rebounds and 6 assists. And then Karl Anthony Towns does his thing with about 12 rebounds per game. And he's playing much better defense this season too. So I think if the Warriors are to get matched up with the Wolves in the first round in a 2-7 matchup and Jimmy Butler's healthy, I feel like the Wolves could honestly probably take them 6 or 7 games. And, depending on how well Klay Thompson plays, I think the Wolves could beat them. And then the Warriors, I think any team, I guess, has much more trouble closing out later rounds when they have struggles in the early rounds. So
yes,
they're going to struggle in the first round, definitely, without Steph Curry. Like, unless they end up unless like the Clippers get in and then they play the Clippers and then
Yeah.
they can probably sweep the Clippers. But even I mean I don't know. You never know. With DeAndre Jordan could probably go off and kill them on the boards. Whatever it may be. Just there's no favorable matchup, I guess. There's not necessarily there's no one team that the Warriors can be looking at the bottom of the standings and be like, oh, we want to play them because Utah's 23-4 in their last 27 games. They have Rudy Gobert, who they have no answer for. Denver is probably just as good an offense as them, so they'd be difficult to defend. The Warriors would probably still, but I guess mainly you'd probably want to worry about getting matched up with Utah or Minnesota because if that happens, then you're probably going to play 6 or 7 games, and then your second round matchup is not going to be easy because as the 2 seed, you'd play the 3 seed, the winner of 3-6, and the 3-6 winner will probably either be like New Orleans or Portland. In Portland this year, I mean, if you don't Damian Lillard, never he's probably bucket for bucket, he can match Steph Curry, and if Steph Curry is not there, obviously that's going to create an issue because
Yeah.
Durant is too big to be out guarding Damian Lillard because Kevin Durant is going to need to be guarding somebody else.
So they'll have to put Clay on him, but then who's going to guard CJ McConnell?
Exactly, and they'll probably do switches all day to get Damian Lillard off of Clay, and then Damian Lillard will probably go one-on-one against, I don't know, Quinn Cook, Sean Livingston.
Yeah.
Someone like that. I guess Sean Livingston is a good defender, but he's really, really aged poorly.
Yeah.
Him, Iguodala, all of those guys who were contributing pieces the past couple of years have completely fallen off. I don't know what it is, but their bench is not what it used to be.
Yeah, and really it was miraculous that Sean Livingston lasted as long as he did with that horrific knee injury.
Yeah, it is very interesting, but at this point, it really just feels like age. I guess people don't really look at it, but he's been in the league since 2004. It's not like he's some young player that can he's not like a spark plug. He's just a tall point guard who developed a good mid-range jump shot. There's nothing really, standout worthy about him except he did one good. I remember in 2016 when Steph Curry went down with that MCL sprain that year. He had a 20-point game in the first game of the playoffs, and then basically for the rest of the playoffs, he completely disappeared. But, injuries this year are obviously going to play a huge factor in who ends up winning the championship because, so basically back to my earlier point, I feel like as though the Cavs probably have a better chance because their road through the East is going to be much easier than Golden State's road through the West, and especially without Steph Curry. Because if Steph Curry ends up staying out until the conference finals, you're going to have a whole issue where he's probably going to need at least one game to get reintegrated. They'll probably lose that game. Then they'll have to go on the road because they want a home court advantage against Houston.
Yeah.
Houston's going to be able to outshoot them. Houston can defend just as well as they can. Chris Paul is going to give Steph Curry complete. The thing that I really like about Houston's makeup as a team is that you can't do that one thing that they always do, which is put Clay on the better perimeter player and then just let Steph hide on anyone. You can't do that because that's one of the reasons that I think they've always struggled against Portland is because Steph Curry cannot guard either CJ McCollum or Damian Lillard. So there's no way that if you get James Harden on Steph Curry, it's a wrap. And then if you get Chris Paul on Steph Curry, Chris Paul probably won't score on him as much, but he's definitely going to be able to make plays versus Steph Curry because he's probably a much I would say his basketball IQ is probably second to the only person who I think would have a higher basketball IQ than Chris Paul is probably LeBron James. So I think Chris Paul is going to be able to, outplay Steph Curry, especially if he's not healthy. So, I think that it's going to be really interesting playoffs this year. And I hope the NBA Finals matchup ends up being Cleveland and Houston, just because I think it would be cool. Because I want LeBron to win more championships, and I don't want to see the Warriors play in a finals again because if they end up playing in a finals and they're healthy, then they're just going to dominate it, and it's not even going to be any fun. So.
Yeah, definitely. And just going through the player comparison tool where I can look at each matchup and how a player results when he's facing a specific position player on the court. In 27 games against Chris Paul, Stephen Curry averages 20 points per game. And just in the past year, because obviously it's much different facing him on the Clippers than on the Rockets, he had 19 points, 29 points, and 22 points on 36, 36, and 29 minutes played. So not too far below his standards, but you also notice that the last game that was in was January, when all of the Warriors were still healthy. So it's a much different argument when you have obviously you got your three different skilled players that you can pass to Draymond, Clay, and Kevin Durant. And that's a lot easier to deal with Chris Paul for. You can just dish it off than having to rely on yourself. And it's interesting because whenever the Warriors are getting injured, part of that article that I was talking about showed how they go into a lot more isolation ball, especially when Stephen Curry is off the court because that's Kevin Durant's game, and they run the offense through Kevin Durant when Stephen Curry's gone.
Yeah,
And it's very telling that with the effective field goal percentage of Kevin Durant with Stephen Curry on the court is 63%, but without Stephen Curry on the court, it drops down to 55%. For Klay Thompson, 67.5%, it drops down to 49%, and Draymond Green, 55, drops down to 45. So
yeah.
it's a
Steph Curry
significant
is their
difference.
entire offense.
Oh yeah,
And I think another like Kevin Durant, as great of a basketball player as he is, like I think at some point people need to start realizing that Kevin Durant is not what he is without. Like Kevin Durant has never played on a bad team. Like he's old. Like
yeah, except for his
Serge
rookie year.
Ibaka, at the peak of Serge Ibaka's powers, he was averaging like 2.5 blocks per game and should have been Defensive Player of the Year at least one of the years that he was in Oklahoma City. Russell Westbrook, even though he wasn't a triple double machine in the same way that he is now, he was still like 23 points, 10 assists, 8 rebounds, numbers close to that. And then James Harden, when he was there, obviously they had a really nice bench, and then he's been playing in Golden State. But Kevin Durant, like, I don't mean to say this in a way to diminish him in any way, but the truth is that if Kevin Durant was playing on a mediocre or bad team, like, we would view him in the same way that we view Tracy McGrady. Like, he's just a really good scorer. His efficiency wouldn't be nearly as good, and he would be trying to take over games with the scoring, and it wouldn't always work. Like, Kevin Durant is extremely talented, but I don't think that it's like Kevin Durant has never shown anything to anyone to the point where you would say that a team can win a championship with him as its, whatever. Like you can't win a championship with him as I don't want to say the best player because I think he's a better player than Steph Curry, but I don't think you can win a championship. Or like I'm not going to say that we can't, that you can, but we don't have any proof to say that you can win a championship with Kevin Durant being the focal point of your offense or your defense because like you can say that about Steph Curry because Steph Curry is the focal point of their offense and they've won 2 championships. You can say that about LeBron because he's won 3 championships and he's always been the focal point of what they've been doing. You can say that about Dirk Nowitzki, he did it. You can say that about Dwayne Wade, he did it. You can say that about Kobe Bryant, he did it. You can say that about Shaquille O'Neal, he did it. But you can't like Kevin Durant is not like he plays very similar to players like he plays very similar to players who people think are worse than him when he's playing without another superstar point guard. Like he plays very similarly to DeMar DeRozan and Giannis Antetokounmpo and LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard. Like he plays a lot of isolation. He tries to create. He tries to be a playmaker, and it just doesn't always work because he's really not that good of a playmaker. His assist totals are often inflated by the fact that he's dishing off to Russell Westbrook on drives for like 4 of them, or he's dishing off to Klay Thompson for open threes, or Steph Curry for open threes, or Draymond Green when he can shoot, Nick Young. Like Kevin Durant really isn't that good of a playmaker, so I don't really think that you can run an offense through him entirely. Like you can run an offense through him as the best scorer, but I mean, even since he's been in Golden State, he's never led the team in scoring. Like this season, I think Steph Curry. The only reason that Kevin Durant is leading the team in scoring this season is because there have been 2 games where Steph Curry left the game with an injury, so his averages went down. But for most of the year, Steph Curry was leading the team. Steph Curry led the team last year. So, I mean, I think Kevin Durant he's a little bit overrated, to tell you the truth, because I don't think that, like Giannis, we know that Giannis Antetokounmpo, I'm not saying that Giannis is better than KD, but we know that Giannis can carry a team, like, by himself. You don't know that about Kevin Durant. We've never seen it. They play the Bucks tonight without Steph Curry, but like the thing is with Durant is that even if Steph doesn't play, it's like you can't give him a pass because Klay Thompson is probably the 2nd or 3rd greatest shooter of all time. Draymond Green is supposedly an amazing defensive player, but I guess it just goes to show you that one player can completely change the dynamic of a team, and I think that's something that Steph Curry doesn't get enough credit for.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic point that we have been overrating Kevin Durant, and it's always a great reminder whenever you're on your own that you have to perform, and when you don't perform, and the Warriors aren't the #1 seed right now, and when he's barely leading the team in scoring, as you mentioned, and obviously if you go to points scored per like 36 minutes or 48 minutes, obviously it's not going to be Kevin Durant. And yeah, he's essentially never played on a bad team, like the only one being his rookie year with the Supersonics, team that isn't even around anymore. And
Yeah.
yeah, like you made a comparison to Tracy McGrady, but that comparison's kind of weird because McGrady sucked at defense and he got super injured. I think a more telling one is a comparison to Clyde Drexler in with the Trailblazers, where obviously Kevin Durant's had more success than Clyde, but if you look at later in his career, Clyde going to the Rockets and like that, them having some success there, and also just being completely on his own and early on in his career getting into the NBA Finals against Michael Jordan, and I think it was his last year before he retired the first time. So that could be a good comparison between him and
2012. Yeah.
yeah 2012 Thunder. But yeah, no, it's interesting that Kevin Durant has seemed like one of the luckiest NBA players around lately, and yeah, it's hopefully you can get some rings off of it. But yeah, hopefully he'll get judged more fairly and not viewed as better than LeBron James. Because
Oh, but just on a note about why I chose Tracy McGrady, I don't think, and you made the point about defense. Kevin Durant, I don't think is that good of a defender because
no, he's a
when you
team defender.
exactly. He's 7 feet tall. Why is this the first season that he's even close to block? He's not blocking 2 shots a game. Like people on, I don't know why the ESPN broadcasters and like every time he plays on live TV are like, oh, he's leading the league in blocks. He's not. Anthony Davis is leading the league in blocks with 2.5. Kevin Durant is at 1.8. That's not close. zero point 0.7 blocks per game is a lot of blocks. So
Yeah, here, let me check
Durant
who's
is
leading it in blocks per 36 minutes.
sorry.
Let me check who's leading it in blocks per 36 minutes. They might be talking about that.
Maybe, but regardless, the point is that if you're 7 feet tall and you're playing in the best defensive team in the league, then yes, you should be a good shot blocker. Like people try and say things like as though he's some sort of tremendous rim protector when he's just not. Like Kevin Durant, I saw a statistic actually a couple months ago that said that there are only 2 players in the NBA who are keeping opponents to under 50% field goal percentage at the rim this season, and the 2 people were 7'3" Kristaps Porzingis and 6'8" LeBron James. So, I mean, you can block as many shots as you want, but at the end of the day, if people are scoring super efficiently against you when you're at the rim, then like you're really not that good of a rim protector. You're just kind of good at getting your hand up there and swatting shots. That's another one of my criticisms against Hassan Whiteside's one year because like you can block a lot of shots, but that does not mean it's the same thing as getting a lot of steals doesn't make you a good defender. It's like getting a lot of blocks kind of just makes you a good help defender, and someone who's tall with the ability to block a shot doesn't make you a good defender. And I guess like if Kevin Durant like it's not like Kevin Durant made some sort of complete change to his game when he came to Golden State and was like, I'm gonna all of a sudden become an amazing defensive player. That's not what happened. It just became much easier for him to be a better defensive player because he was just as talented in Oklahoma City his last year there than he was his first year in Golden State. But all of a sudden everyone was like, oh my gosh, Kevin Durant, he might be the best two-way player in the league. What's Kawhi doing? Oh my god, he's like Kevin Durant is really like individually, I've never seen Kevin Durant shut anybody down. I've never seen him stay with anyone. Like people always point to the thing with LeBron on Christmas Day, but he fouled him 3 times, and the NBA the last 2-minute report confirmed that he fouled him 3 times, and they didn't call it. But
Yeah,
I say all that to basically say like Tracy McGrady. Like I was just looking at their season by season numbers, and Tracy McGrady had one season where he averaged like 32 points, 7 rebounds, and like 5 assists, which is directly comparable to Kevin Durant's MVP season, which was 32.7 rebounds, 5 assists. And then when I was telling you earlier about the whole thing about how Kevin Durant's less efficient when he's playing without a star, his shooting numbers are comparable to Tracy McGrady. So it was just kind of a random comparison because I know they were both swingmen who could score really well, but yeah.
yeah, okay. And just going through blocks per 36 minutes, it gets even worse for Kevin Durant. Just looking at players who have played at least 1,500 minutes this season, about equivalent to 50 games played. You have Porzingis at 2.7, then Gobert, Capella, Davis, let's see, Miles Turner, Brooke Lopez, Joel Embiid, and then you finally get to Kevin Durant. It's at 7 for whatever that is. So yeah, I don't know where the ESPN guys are getting those facts. They sounds like some fake news to me.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the argument. It's like, oh my gosh, he's a small forward. It's so impressive. Like, okay, yes, we understand technically he's a small forward, but he's
He's
as
7 feet
tall
tall.
as DeMarcus Cousins. He's
Yeah,
as tall. He's a little bit taller than Anthony Davis. Like, he's not really. He's really not that. Like, I mean, Kevin Durant plays small forward because he chooses to play small forward. He's the size of a center. The reason he doesn't play center is because he's thin. Like it has nothing to do with any of that. But
Yeah, and most of the time he lines up at power forward anyways. I don't
yeah,
know.
exactly. I mean, honestly, I think it'd be pretty cool if he played center because if he had started his NBA career as a center, I think it'd be pretty easy to say that he's the most, he's one of the better centers because no center, not necessarily one of the better centers, but he'd be the most unique center of all time because
Oh yeah,
no center would be able to do nearly as much as he could. But I mean that's a discussion for another day. Kevin Durant entering the league as a center versus a small forward, but whatever.
yeah. He'd probably get compared most to Manute Bol if he had a jump shot, which
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, but also I mean, just from a legacy standpoint, I feel like it could have been really good for him because if Kevin Durant was obviously he couldn't have known this when he entered the league because the crop of big men in the league when he entered the league was much better than it is now. But can you imagine if Kevin Durant was a center in the league right now? Like he'd easily be the other well, I guess not, maybe not this year because you have Joel Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns, Kristaps Porzingis, and all those guys, but maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, before all those guys were drafted, he probably would have been the best center in the league because like.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of room up at the top of the NBA for great centers. Not now, like now
Honestly,
past.
he'd probably have more All NBA first team selections too, because he wouldn't be competing against LeBron, Kawhi, and all these other guys for spots.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
whatever. That's just a tangent because of that's all he is.
Yeah, I still wish we classified them by reach, but it
Wingspan, yeah.
seems
No,
like
no.
that's never gonna happen.
Oh yeah. Speaking of this is random. There's a player entering the NBA draft. His name is Mohamed Bamba. He has an 8 foot wingspan.
Holy crap!
He's 7'1" and he has an 8 foot wingspan.
That's like
He
Rudy Gobert levels. Jeez.
he's probably gonna be a really good defender in the NBA. Yeah. Oh
Oh
no.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
Mohamed Bamba. He plays at the University of Texas.
Holy
His height
crap.
is 6'11", close to 7 feet, and he has an 8 foot wingspan.
That's absurd. I gotta see this guy. I just want to see what
Yeah.
you all have to look up a picture of this guy. He must look like a. Oh my god.
Yeah, his arms are quite long.
Jeez, that's like that boxer. I don't know his name, but there was like a boxer that whose reach was like a foot longer than his height. It was absolutely ridiculous. But this guy is just as crazy.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay, cool. That's something to look forward to, I guess. Hopefully, he doesn't get injured or get like shoulder surgery. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
goodness.
No, I think he'll be. Yeah, that was just yeah. But anyways,
Whew. Okay, but speaking of Rudy Gobert, because I know that was that's always someone I'm happy to talk about. You were mentioning how the Timberwolves are probably going to be who the Warriors are going to match up against, and it seems like that's the best outlook for them in the first round at this point, unless they can somehow luck into the Pelicans. But we'll see if that happens, because the Jazz are just ridiculously hot right now, and it's going to be super difficult for Draymond Green and Kevin Durant to get to the rim if Rudy Gobert's out there. Because
I mean,
even when he was like at 70% last year in the second round, he was still stopping him.
and I mean, I think another interesting thing to note is that Klay Thompson has never been injured before. He broke his thumb. We have no idea what Klay Thompson. At the end of the day, all shooters are streaky shooters. It's just Klay Thompson seems to be one of those ones who rarely goes cold. But I mean, I've watched a lot of Warriors games. Since I started watching the NBA, and I've definitely seen Klay Thompson go through stretches of maybe 10, 12 games where he really is not shooting it that well. So I would if honestly if Klay Thompson ends up not being ready to go in. Okay, if Klay Thompson's not ready to go in the first round, I think the chances of the Warriors being upset in the first round goes up tremendously because then it's literally Kevin Durant and Draymond Green who really can't shoot that well. And so you're kind of going off of what Sean Livingston, Nick Young, Kevin Durant, Andre Iguodala, and Draymond Green. I'm not really sure that can compete with Jeff Teague and Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins and Taj Gibson.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to see. Yeah, you just imagine the Warriors in a 7-game series to start the playoffs. The world would be losing its mind.
Taj Gibson is, I don't really think that he's aside from maybe the passing, but he's really not that different of a player than Draymond Green.
No,
So
he's
Taj
essentially
Gibson
the same. Yeah.
Yeah, Karl Anthony Towns would completely kill whatever center they play, and then Andrew Wiggins can score on Kevin Durant because and then Jeff Teague is probably gonna dance on whoever he's playing, and then Jimmy Butler I guess would have to go against it. I don't even know. I don't even know at that point, but yeah, I think it could be interesting. I'm a Timberwolves fan, so obviously I'd be hoping for it, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean Klay Thompson having a broken thumb is not it's on his shooting hand too, so I mean, if Klay Thompson comes back into the playoffs and he has a complete first round going into the second round cold streak, then obviously your chances are even worse. So the best outcome for the Warriors would be for them to quickly get out of the first round so that they don't have to play any games while Steph is still recovering. So then they could probably have Steph back for the second round pretty easily if they end up sweeping the first round. But I really don't think they're going to sweep the first round unless there's some last 7 games of the season injury, or they just end up playing like a Denver or a someone. But even Denver, I think maybe could get a game off of them.
And it looks like these playoffs are shaping up to be exactly the same in the West as the 2015-2016 series, where obviously Stephen Curry being injured heading into it. But yeah, like end up getting into a 6-game series against the Rockets. Maybe it was 5 games actually.
5. It was 5. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but like a tough series against the Rockets, then having to head into an even tougher series the next round, and having a really hard seed in the conference final. I mean, it's not seed team waiting in the conference finals in the Rockets. Like this Rockets team, it's even better than that Thunder team from that year, and we saw how much the Warriors struggled against them, and it's been absolutely bizarre just how much injuries have played a role in this season. I thought we were done after the All-Star break.
See, the interesting thing to me is the one good thing about Golden State is that the way that they're seeded, they can completely avoid having to play Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And while Oklahoma City, a lot of people don't really view as a threat, I definitely view them as a threat to take if they were to play the Warriors, to take them 6 games, because at least 6 games, because if Steph Curry isn't there, nobody's going to guard Russell Westbrook. Or I guess you'd have to that's not true, because I guess Klay Thompson would guard him anyway, but Klay Thompson would have to probably guard Paul George so that Kevin Durant can guard someone like Corey Brewer, so that Kevin Durant has enough energy to expend on offense, because he'd have to carry the offense without Steph Curry. So, it'd be kind of like a domino effect in terms of who they guard. So, Russell, and even so, Klay Thompson guards Russell Westbrook, but you can't really, unless you have an amazing rim protector. I feel honestly, Russell Westbrook's nightmare matchup in the playoffs, I feel would be the Jazz, because then he'd have to try to attack the rim with Rudy Gobert there all the time.
Oh yeah, 100%.
In terms of the Warriors, with Kevin Durant doesn't, he's not really going to be stationary at the rim like that. So, and just overall, Oklahoma City, in the season series, Oklahoma City beat them in the season series 2-1. They beat them by 21 points and 20 points. Or 23 points and 20 points, or some really big margin like that. It's somewhere between 39 and 45 points. But, they've beaten them pretty handily. And I just feel like Kevin Durant, still an extremely sensitive player. I'm not sure if you saw his headline that came out when he was on a podcast with Bill Simmons, and he was basically complaining about how people talk about him all the time as though he's not the second best player in the world. But regardless, he's a pretty emotional guy. I just feel it'd be an emotionally tough series for him to have to go back to Oklahoma City, and he'd obviously get all the hate in the world, and we all know he's not really receptive to that in a positive way. So that could be a really tough series. I doubt Klay Thompson is going to hit 11 threes again in Oklahoma City. So, I think that could be interesting. And because, Paul George, Paul George can really defend. Like I said earlier, he's probably a top 3 perimeter defender in the league. So if there's anyone in the Western Conference that you would want to guard Paul George, or that you would want to guard Kevin Durant, Paul George would be one of the 3. So I think that could be a really interesting series. The one thing I really like about the Western Conference this year is that I really feel like any team could get to the conference finals. It's not except maybe San Antonio, because LaMarcus Aldridge just got injured. So, New Orleans, if they can beat Oklahoma City if Oklahoma City is inconsistent in the first round, and then, they would lose to Houston probably. But just depending on how the seeding falls, any team on the second side, basically, I think Houston definitely is not. I think
Houston's safe.
Houston's safe, but everyone on the other side of the bracket, so basically in the first round, Houston will play
Jazz or Timberwolves.
Either the Jazz or the Timberwolves. So, but depending on if Utah gets 8, then Utah's going. But if Minnesota gets 8, then they're going. You know what I mean? Basically, whoever avoids the Rockets can get to the conference finals, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely, and of course that Warriors Thunders series you were talking about earlier, that'd be completely dependent on what would happen in the Trailblazers Spurs series that is looking more and more likely every day. Of course, having that be a Spurs upset, which doesn't seem at all unlikely, but I think I'm going to transition the topic away from this, just because the podcast next week or the week after is essentially only going to be talking about
It's
the first round matchups and just going position by position through them. So I don't want
yeah,
to bore people too much by just doing the same thing over and over again.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, okay, I guess we should try and conclude an open-ended discussion we had last week on NBA expansion franchises. So, where we ended, I was about to get into why I thought the fourth expansion franchise to get the NBA up to 34 teams. That fourth franchise should be placed in Europe actually, and not in North America at all.
Okay.
So basically, the precedent for this would be the third league in. I read about this like a year ago. The third division in the English Rugby Association, so just like the basically the English Premier League of rugby in England. One of its teams is based in Canada. And this past season, they everyone was super worried, and they were saying, "Oh no, what's their road games going to look like?" And they're never going to survive. But because of how well they scheduled it, it wasn't actually that bad, and they had a pretty comparable amount of miles traveled compared to the other teams, just because they would schedule super long road games, super long road stands and like home stands, and so it wasn't a big problem for them. It was more so a problem for the rest of the league because they would have to travel out to them like once every so often, but you only have to face them once or twice in the season, so it wasn't a big deal. So I thought because the NBA is so focused on expanding to new markets, why not place a team in Madrid? Why not place a team in London? Just because you're afraid that it's going to screw up the entire NBA season? If you look at how the Celtics 76ers game went in London, they were just fine heading back afterwards. It wasn't a big deal. And if you look at how the NBA schedule is set up right now, you play each team in your division 6 times, each team and your other team in your conference 4 times, and then some free, and then the rest of them 2 times. So that means that some teams they only have to travel out there once, and then at worst you have to travel out there twice because we're assuming that the division thing is going to be gotten rid of because that's a stupid system. So that's not that bad to just have you travel out across the ocean twice in a season. Because that's really all you're talking about.
See, I agree with you in this. Like, I think that, like, for anyone who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, just listen to the podcast last week. Ryan and I were talking about like, how the conferences should sort of go like differently, like in terms of the divisions. Like, the division shouldn't be by where you are; it should be like on your record and stuff. So, um, if you organize the divisions properly, I think you could definitely do it because really, I think like you said, like a flight from like all you really have to do is get whatever that team is. Like you can just have them play the Wizards, and then after they play the Wizards, they can get a flight from DC to wherever they need to go.
Yeah.
And it would be a long flight, yeah, but I mean, it's not going to be like it'd probably be about the same length as it is from I don't know, like anywhere, and like a really long flight in the United States, like
Yeah, here I'll find a mileage comparison.
yeah, like whatever that may be. Like I'm not sure if it would be like the Celtics to whatever team in California, but or like even when the Supersonics were around, like Seattle to Miami, that would be awful. That's cross country, so I think it could definitely work in terms of like travel. I don't think would end up being the ultimate issue with it because you could just have extremely long, you could just have longer road trips too. So that way, like and longer homestands. You know what I'm saying? Like you wouldn't have to do, and like honestly, if you ended up doing two, then it'd be even easier because then you could just kind of like you could do like an alternating thing where you have more teams come over and play their 2 game stands against those teams and just
Yeah.
delay it. And if you spread out the schedule, it'd be fine because then you'd still like the schedule needs to be spread out anyway because like I think this season they'll really look at spreading out the schedule more because of how many players have gotten hurt this season. Like I think every single one of the top 10 players in the league has been hurt this year except for LeBron James. So
Who never gets
like
hurt?
if you spread out if you spread out the season and then you just give them more time for travel, then yeah, I don't really see why it's like it could definitely work. I just feel like the main concern I guess would be marketing maybe because like basketball is really not that common in certain places. I mean, if you ended up doing it in London, based on the turnout of that Celtics 76ers game, London would probably work.
Yeah,
Madrid, I get,
yeah.
they out there like they love their Spanish leagues and stuff.
Yeah, and
That's
like the only other one that could work is Paris, but that's pushing it because Paris is in eastern France. Like you
yeah,
couldn't do any Central European one. But I
Yeah,
just pulled up the mileage, and Boston to London is 3,269 miles, and Miami to Seattle is 3,290 miles. So it's actually
exactly.
shorter than some that you could expect within the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, I think you could definitely do London. I don't think guys would mind going to London really. Um,
Yeah,
and
and it's only
like
like 50 more to Madrid.
yeah, yeah. So it really ended up like as long as you spread out the schedule, I don't think it'd be bad because like if you have a team, if, like let's say you expand and you have a team in London and Madrid, right? Like you said, that's only 50 miles. So then you could start your road trip like just going cross country. I guess like if you're Miami, right? Like you could just prepare for a long series of flights, like Miami, then you go to Boston, and then after Boston you go to London, and then after London you go to Madrid, and then you just make your way back, right?
Yeah,
Like as long as you organize the schedule such that you would play all your games against those teams, sort of like not back to back necessarily, but consecutively. Like you'd basically like if you're Miami, right? You play Boston, then you play London, then you play Madrid, and then after you play Madrid again, then you play London again, then you play Boston again, then you go back home.
yeah,
So then like
absolutely.
it worked.
Yeah, and like you just have to change how you think of the schedule and make it so instead of the NBA randomizing it right now, and I'm sure they have some factors where they say, okay, we don't want to set up every team with a 7 road games and 15 game stretch like what the in 15 day stretch like what the Nuggets have right now, but it seems like for the most part it's randomized. Well, whereas here you would just say, okay, let's make sure that every team has this London series figured out ahead of time, and then we'll just make the London team's schedule first, and then we'll do the rest of the NBA.
Yeah, you just have to do it around it, I guess. Like they would just sort of have to not do like, and like I was telling you earlier, like last podcast, like they need to be organizing the schedule such that you play teams like if you're the Warriors, right, or like the Rockets, or I guess the Rockets next season, right? Like you can't be playing like you can't have the 11th easiest like you can't have the 11th easiest schedule in the league if you're the best team in the league.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous. Like, and they factor in many things to easy schedule, like how many road trips you have and like how many back to backs and like all that stuff. And I think the Warriors I think last year or the year before, whatever year it was, they had like I just said, like they had one of the 10 easiest schedules in the league. So like yeah, like it's gonna be easy to run off that many wins in consecutive years if you're playing one of the easiest schedules in the league, but you're the most talented team in the league. So they really need to start organizing the schedule in terms of like you need to give everyone more of an equal opportunity to win games. Like I get it that the Phoenix Suns are completely horrible, but if the Phoenix Suns were playing an easier like let's say the Phoenix Suns were playing the easiest schedule in the league, you can't tell me you wouldn't think that they'd win more games because obviously Devin Booker is going to be better than some people on some nights.
yeah.
So you know,
And no, I absolutely agree with that. And something that I actually think it would be a great thing for us to do after the NBA Finals is just take the schedule and see and design our own and like see how that would turn out versus what we think the NBA would put out. I think that could be something fascinating, especially
yeah,
in the NBA offseason when there's nothing to talk about. But
yeah,
yeah, like it's ridiculous that the Warriors have the 11th easiest schedule almost entirely because of a crappy division and just getting lucky in terms of which teams they have to face 3 times within their conference and which teams they face twice. Like that doesn't make any sense, and we need a system much closer to how the NFL handles its schedule, where you have to face the best. If you're the best team in your division, you face the best team in one division in the conference and the best team in the other division in the conference, and that's how the schedule controls for your strength. And
yeah.
it does an okay job at making the strength of schedule better, but at least it's doing something. Like unlike in the NBA right now, where it's completely dependent on just nothing, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, and talking about like schedules just in general, right? Like if you did sort of like what we were talking about last week, where you organized 6 conferences for 30 teams in term or 6 divisions for 30 teams in terms of your record, right?
Yeah,
Then you could even do a simpler playoff format like the NFL does, and just have all the division winners in the playoffs,
yeah,
like and then do it like that way. But then obviously you'd only have 6 teams, so then there'd be something a bye incorporated. But regardless, like if we're talking about expansion anyway, then you can just have 2 more divisions, right? You could add 4 teams, and then you could put every team has 5 teams. So you'd have to do a 5 team expansion to. I guess you actually okay. That would be a little excessive to
yeah,
have 10 more teams, but still, like regardless, like if you just add more teams to each division, you could figure something out. Like have like one team that's or two of the like 2 team like the 2 teams with the second best records after the top six. Like you could include those two teams in the playoffs, and then you could do it like that, right? Or honestly, you could figure it out. Honestly, like if the NBA really wanted to do something, they obviously have all the funds, all the money, all the time, all the power to do so. It's literally just a matter of whether or not they want to do it. Like I hear them, they complain about so many things that they could fix. Like they talk about issues with like back to backs. If they really wanted to, all they would have to do is just expand it, right? Like you just have to push. Like you have to make the NBA season start at the beginning of like at the end of September, right? And then you have more weeks to do so. Like there's really I don't really understand why there's not a reason to start. Like why don't you start the NBA season on like September 20th, right? And then you just spread the games out more.
Yeah, and
Like
just not have preseason.
like I don't really feel like there's a need for a preseason because no one plays like all the veterans don't even play in the preseason. Like the only purpose of the preseason is for like guys to like get warmed up, but like there are teams that don't even practice. So I don't understand why that is. Like you should have like a summer league like you usually do, right? For like the new players, and then like I guess like they can just do something separate for players who want to. Because like when's the last time LeBron James has played in a preseason game? Probably like 10 years. Like when's the last time Kevin Durant played in a preseason? Like like they don't really, like there's really no point of having a preseason. Honestly,
Yeah,
I feel.
and that's actually a fantastic point. I've never really thought about it like that. And just looking at when the preseason started this year, it started September 30th. So yeah, and I believe the NBA regular season started like middle of October. So that's 2 weeks.
October 17th was the yeah. Like there's no reason for that. Like if none of your stars are playing in the summer, like you're literally having games prior to the season to create more opportunity for your players to get hurt.
Yeah,
Like there's no point. Like you're not playing for anything. There's no preseason championship. It's literally just an opportunity to warm up.
preseason
But my
championship.
my response to that would literally just be just practice more. Like you have more practice time too if you're like rather than having a preseason, just extend the regular season and then just then you'd be able to incorporate more practice time as well. So you don't need warm up games. Like there's no point of watch. Like no one watches the preseason. It's just so dumb. Like I don't understand why there's an NBA preseason. There's no reason for it. Like what do code like and like NBA like you shouldn't need, like if you're all a bunch of professional athletes, right? Especially teams that have been together for years coming. Like the Warriors don't need a fifth preseason. Like if they've been together 5 years in a row, right? Like there's just like, and I feel like it creates more of an element too because then you don't really have like let's say the Warriors last season, right? Like when Kevin Durant first got there, if literally like if Kevin Durant's first time playing in a game with the Warriors was in an NBA game, I think that would be much better because then everyone knew it was already such a supreme advantage for them to get Kevin Durant. So it'd be a little bit cooler if he kind of had to learn it on the fly instead of getting 4 or 5 whatever it is preseason games to kind of figure things out a little bit. Like there's just I don't see the point in a preseason. Like you could just start the NBA season like September 20th, September 30th, whatever. Extend the regular season, spread out games. Then you wouldn't have all these issues. And then obviously when you do that, you can make more competitive schedules. When you do that, you can obviously open doors for expansion and things like that because then travel wouldn't be nearly as bad. I don't think NBA players have a problem traveling. I think their problem is that when they after they travel, right after they travel, they have to play. Like that's the problem. It's not the fact that traveling is a part of being in the NBA. So it's not like all these guys are going to complain about how long a flight is. Like that's not going to be a thing. Like it's going to be more predicated on how the schedule is because I don't think that we would even hear that many complaints from players if the schedule was balanced better. But it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely. And if you just look at how moving it back 18 days would affect the double header problem, which just looking at an article from the beginning of the season on the NBA reducing double headers from 16.3 per team last year, and not last year to 14.4 this year. If you add 18 games to the season, 18 days to season, don't add more games.
Yeah.
Then you've completely gotten rid of the doubleheader problem, and heck, you even have a couple more days where you can just add some rest in for the players. So like that immediately fixes the problem, and yeah, as you said, it opens the room for expansion because a lot of people forget that. Oh wait, now what am I talking about? That doesn't add any additional games, so yeah, that does fix the problem, and it opens up room where you can have an NBA team in Europe, and you can just have that be like an additional day of rest beforehand or afterwards.
Yeah, and not to go off topic, but breaking news: Joel Embiid needs surgery.
Yes.
He's diagnosed with an orbital fracture and will need surgery. There is no timetable for his return.
Yeah, I mean, he was so close to making it to the end of the season. We were talking about
No,
how
just okay. If it's an orbital, do you know an orbital fracture was the same injury that Derrick Rose had when he played with a mask, right? So he should be back by the
same with
playoffs.
Kyrie Irving. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, okay. So he'll play in the playoffs. He'll just need a mask.
yeah.
Okay,
I
good,
think they
good.
stay out like a week, and then yeah, they're fine.
So okay, so he'll be back for the playoffs. Okay, cool. And they've already clinched the playoffs, so it's fine. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
They
no.
could no, they could slip in seeding though.
Yeah, maybe a little. Oh yeah, it's super tight. Well, no, actually, it's really not.
It's not
I thought
tight, but they could probably drop to maybe six at worst.
yeah, sorry, I thought the Wizards were tied with them, but yeah, no, within the East, it's 45 wins for the Cavs, 44 for the 76ers and Pacers. So at worst, you lose home court advantage against the Pacers, which I don't think is that big of a deal, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah. The Wizards are they're not playing well. Do you know what? This is off topic, but do you know what happened to John Wall? Like, I don't know why he's not playing. Like, I thought he was supposed to be back 6 weeks. Like, I thought his timetable for return was 6 weeks, and that was like 4 months ago.
I think I jinxed him, to be honest, saying that I didn't think he was going to come back until the beginning of April, but no, I have no clue why he's not here.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. Like back to the what we were talking about. I mean, yeah, I agree. Like this, the scheduling issues are just kind of like at this point, like it's like if you really care that much, then just fix them. Like you obviously have you can do it. Like there's nothing preventing you from doing it.
Yeah, 100%. And like, yeah, that's something I literally have never thought about before, just getting rid of preseason. I really wish I could look at a study right now that said how many minutes veterans play during the preseason. But yeah, I agree. It's
They
probably,
don't. I mean, like I remember I watched. I've tried to watch the preseason the past 2 years because like preseason, right? Like it's supposed to get you prep for the NBA, but it's not doing anything when Steph Curry is in the game and he's playing 6 minutes. Like it's just it's there's no point. Like he doesn't do anything. You're putting out that like there's risk of injury. Like can you imagine like if like what if Kevin Durant, right? Like what if in their first preseason game with the Warriors, Kevin Durant had a Gordon Hayward type injury? Like
oh my God.
like that would have ruined their entire season. Like, I mean, obviously, it would have made the NBA season more interesting. That's awful to say, but
Yeah.
but still, like for the Warriors themselves, like they'd be pissed. Like, it's like, wow, like we just wasted our entire free agent pickup. Like, what was that? Like,
Yeah, no, and definitely, like, it seems like that would be more of a movement to what Adam Silver wants, which is a system much more similar to how the EPL runs things, where there's no preseason in the EPL, there's a relegation system, and like there's only 20 teams, and like you have multiple championships going on throughout the season. Like it seems like he wants to make it as close to English soccer and really just soccer around the world, much closer to that than what other American sports are doing. So it seems like getting rid of preseason would make sense. And anyways, like in every time you watch like the first game of the season, you always hear the commentators being like, "Oh, well, the players are just getting warmed up because it's the first game of the season." Okay, if you're still getting warmed up by the time the first game is happening, then just move it so that that first game is the first preseason game as well. Like it doesn't make sense.
it doesn't do anything. Like, it's like, exactly. Like, it's like no veteran, no player, period, locks in after the preseason. Like,
Yeah,
they just don't.
exactly.
Like, it's just there's no point in having one. I feel like. I mean, I don't think that you could really go online and actually find it like a detailed anything that advocates for having an NBA preseason. Like it's almost useless. Like it's I just I mean like I like Adam Silver as a commissioner, but like the fact that he's been commissioner since 2014 and the biggest thing he's done is the hack a Shack rule. Like I just feel like he needs to do like just one really big thing.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm gonna look up in like the next 5 minutes the biggest changes made by Adam Silver because now I'm really curious. But
Like yeah, like I mean like David Stern is remembered for like a couple of things. Like he's remembered for like the Chris Paul thing, and he's remembered for just I think I'm not sure if Donald Sterling was under him, but
yeah, he
regardless,
was.
like David Stern was an extremely like active commissioner, and I'm not saying Adam Silver's not a good like an active commissioner, but like I just wish that there was a commissioner who like we knew like was doing things like like in the NFL, right? Like Roger Goodell, right? Like Deflategate was a thing, and he's changing rules. There was the catch rule recently. There was the helmet to helmet rule just a couple days ago. Like I just like the NBA. Like I wish that problems were more addressed directly by the commissioner because he always acknowledges that there are problems, but he doesn't do anything outright to tackle them. Like he doesn't give suggestions. And I thought it was just a really dumb idea this year to not televise the All Star Game draft. I think everyone wanted to see it. And like at the end of the day, it's a business, right? So like you should televise it if you know that literally everyone in the world wants to see it. So I don't know. He's a good commissioner. I like him. He seems like a really good guy, but yeah, I mean, he just doesn't really. He's not really doing enough to satisfy me as a fan, I guess.
Yeah, and like for the most part, I just look back through it. It seems like the only thing that he really did was the Donald Sterling thing. It fell like right in between the two commissioners, so I don't even know how much credit he can get for that. But yeah,
Yeah,
just that and the one and done rule, and overall saying liberal things but not really doing anything. But
yeah,
yeah, like the biggest thing right now, I think, is just he's only been in the job 3 years, so we should obviously give him more time. But when you look at the overall tenure of commissioners in sports, they aren't crazy long overall. Like at best, you get 30 years, but that's if like you start really young too, and you're loved by everybody. You have to
yeah.
think that like he's gonna get like 15 years at the most. So like he's kind of got to get these policies rolling, and it seems like he's more focused on stuff like legalizing sports gambling.
Yeah, like I mean, I get that. Like, what does that do for the game? Like that. I mean,
It makes that money.
yeah, like it doesn't do anything for the game of basketball. Like, I mean, what it is, what it is. Like, it's fine. He's fine, but it's like they're just more things need to be addressed. Like the one rule, like if in games, right? Like you should be able to reverse foul calls
What do you
if
mean?
you review a play and there were like this really irritated. Like this has always irritated me, but it specifically irritated me when it had always bothered me, right? But um like there was again the Christmas Day game against the Warriors and the Cavs. Like Kevin Durant fouled LeBron 3 times in the last 1 minute and 30 seconds of the game. 3 times he fouled him. Not a single one of them was called. And they reviewed the last foul and they confirmed that it wasn't a foul, but because you can't reverse the call, it was called and he fouled him and the ball went out of bounds. So because you can't go back and call a foul, it was deemed a turnover on LeBron.
Yeah, that was the biggest BS ever. And something that I think that the NBA should think about doing is just having it always, like, whenever those situations happen, having it being treated as a foul. And obviously, this is for when it's called a foul and then you want to call it back. Just have it called a foul, roll with it, have the foul shots done. And then when you get to like a TV break or something, do it how they do it with the 3 pointer versus 2 pointer thing when it's super close. Like they'll take the point back if it was called a 3 pointer, but it should have been a 2 pointer. They just pretend that the foul shots didn't happen.
Yeah, like exactly. Like yes, like it's simple fixes like that really irritate me because like at the surface it doesn't seem like that big of an issue, but can you imagine if that play on like what if Kevin Durant fouled LeBron James 3 times at the end of Game 6 of the NBA Finals? Like then what? Then what do you do? Then
Yeah.
you just not call foul? Like did you just let them play on? Like how do you do that? Like then like a referee who didn't even get a good angle of the play just determined how many championship rings that this like one of the best players of all time has. Like that's ridiculous. And another thing, like I just feel like referees, since we're kind of talking about like the players and the commissioner and stuff, the referees association really needs to get together and they need to be more like there cannot be such a thing as a reputation non-call. Like a foul is a foul, and if you commit the foul, then you need to be called for the foul. If it falls under a technical foul, then you need to be called for a technical foul. Because a lot of people don't feel like this is a big issue, but I had a huge problem with this when I was watching it. So I really feel like in an NBA game, and I feel like most people would agree with this, having momentum is a huge that's a huge part of the game, right? Like having momentum and like building momentum and like if you're up in the game then it's easier for you to consistently play well and like you know what I mean, like if you have a lead and you have momentum then you're on a really good pace to win the game, right? And then oftentimes unless the other team completely bounces back then you have a really good shot to win the game, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. So I was watching game 5 of the NBA finals, right? And this past season 2017 NBA finals,
Yeah.
and Kevin, it's the second quarter and there are I think 4 or 5, like somewhere between 5 and 3 minutes left in the second quarter. Okay, Cleveland has all the momentum in the game, and they're up by I think maybe 10 at this point, and it like just the way that the Warriors were playing, kind of sort of disengaged and like not really getting back on defense. Like it kind of seemed like a game that Cleveland could take, right? Like it had the flow of that game. Kevin Durant in the second quarter already had 2 fouls, and LeBron James dunked like all over him, and it was clear as day. Like it was there was no debate about it that Kevin Durant fouled him, and that foul. Actually, I think this might have been earlier in the second quarter. I think this might have been like 8 minutes in the second quarter left, whatever it may be. But it was a lot of time left in the second quarter basically, and he clearly fouled LeBron James, but he didn't. They didn't call a shooting foul on Kevin Durant, and the commentators were kind of like, oh, like that's clearly a reputation non-call. They don't want to give Kevin Durant his third foul because then he'll get sat in the middle of the second quarter. But like you can't do that. Like Kevin Durant committed a foul. You have to put Kevin Durant. You have to give him his third foul. Steve Kerr has to make the decision to take him out of the game. And then like you can't like if LeBron is playing and Kevin Durant's not guarding him and he doesn't have to guard Kevin Durant, then I feel like at that point the Cavaliers were completely positioned to win that game. I don't think that foul calls are not only important at the end of games. Like they're important throughout the game because if you give like let's say you give three shooting foul calls that shouldn't have been shooting fouls and then the game ends up being decided by 6 points. Like those six of those points wouldn't be there if they didn't shoot six free throws from three missed foul calls. Like missed calls always end up being a big deal in games that are close. And I think at this point, with the level of competition in the NBA, we're having more close games because every team is kind of getting a star, and like almost every team I think at this point has at least one good player, if a good young player or a good core. Like every team I think can win a game, like depending on who they're playing, obviously. But like when you make little calls like that, like all the time, like it adds up. Like you completely alter like teams like records and like the playoff standings when you do things like that. And Alvin Gentry I think had a really good point the other day. He was really upset because they lost a game sort of predicated on missed foul calls and stuff like that. And it's like he was saying like Anthony Davis is like he's being hit, he's being grabbed, and he's being thrown around all the time. But just because he's not complaining to the referees about not getting calls, he's not getting calls. And you can't officiate like that when you have guys who are fighting for playoff seeding and fighting for playoff spots. Like, and I completely agree with that. Like, if you really look back on it, right? Like in 2017, last season, right? If like you go through if you go through the Miami Heat schedule, right? I think they played the most games in the league that were decided under 5 points, right?
Yeah.
If you go back through their season and then you correct all the officiating calls, I guarantee that they probably would have a couple more wins to get them into the playoffs. Like if you corrected all the calls that would have went their way. So, I mean, I just think that the refereeing in the league really needs to be addressed as well. I've noticed it's been a little bit better since the All-Star break because the Players Association met with the Referees Association, but like they need to get everything under control with that because like I would absolutely despise it if I saw an NBA championship series or a playoff series or anything like that decided by referees either not wanting to call a call because they feel like it's not right and they want to let the players play, quote unquote, no, like if it's a foul, then it's a foul. Like it's the player's responsibility not to foul, and regardless of how upset they get with you, it's literally your job. Like if you don't want to call foul calls, then you should probably get in another line of work.
Yeah, and it's absolutely ridiculous. I agree that like someone like Kevin Durant can get away with not getting a third foul call on him just because it's an NBA Finals game, and you wouldn't want to be taking too large of a role in deciding the game. If you commit a foul, you commit a foul, and like it's gotten so bad that like I'm actually thinking about if doing it based on just physics and saying, oh, if LeBron is tugged with X amount of newtons of force, then maybe he should get a foul call for that, just because I don't trust the NBA referees at this point. And yeah, as you were saying, the reputation calls are getting completely out of hand. And well, not even out of hand. It's always been this way. Or someone like Shaq, just because he's bigger, is not going to get a foul call on him, and it's going to have to be way more. And like someone like LeBron, whenever he drives to the basket, almost he's getting fouled, but he's not getting a call every single time. Not that he should, but like I'm just saying, it's ridiculous that he's getting officiated different than, as we talked about in the first episode we recorded, Isaiah Thomas getting smacked around just a little bit and him getting a foul call. Like, I guess it's an argument in itself on if that's a fair system that they should have different amounts of contact required to have fouls triggered on them. But it seems pretty obvious that like if you push somebody the same amount, it should be a foul call either way. But
exactly. Like I mean, it's just also this is more breaking news. Joel Embiid will be out 2 to 4 weeks and could miss the first round.
Oh,
that shakes things up.
That's weird.
It puts the first round of playoffs in jeopardy. That changes things.
Yeah, 76ers are out.
The 76ers are out, and Joel's not playing in the first round.
That
yeah, 4 they play Indiana. Oh my god, that makes things much easier for Cleveland because Boston's already decimated with it. Literally, Cleveland's only path at this point to the finals is Toronto. So that's good news for Ron and company.
You know what? We started talking about how the East is a lot better this year. The East just fell apart.
Yeah, the East John Wall and earlier, obviously, Kyrie Irving. Yeah, injuries did kind of make the East fall apart, but yeah,
Dang, that's a
you never
shame.
know. Maybe the referees could even it up.
Yeah. Wow, that is a real shame.
Yeah, that is. The injuries, like I said, this year the injuries have been worse than ever. DeMarcus Cousins is going to go on. Kyrie Irving, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, James Harden, Chris
Yeah,
Paul.
and like the worst thing, it's all been to playoff teams. Like literally, the only injury I can think of in the entire NBA that hasn't happened to a playoff contender has been the Knicks losing Porzingis. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like everything. Like, and there've been some bad ones too. Like DeMarcus Cousins, like that
Yeah,
was
he
big.
might not
And
come back.
Gordon Hayward, that was big. Joel Embiid, this is big. Uh, Steph Curry, that's been big. Chris Paul, that was big. Or we thought it was big. I guess it. I mean, who knows? Maybe if Chris Paul played all his games, they could have won 7 games.
Yeah, and like they still might make 70 games. Well, no, probably not. But geez, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, they'd be the best they can do now. I think is 68. But like, yeah, Chris Paul missed like 18 games, so you can't tell me that they wouldn't have won 2 of them. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
so
he always misses like a couple games, but just to every other team, like everyone's got some injuries going on. Even if you look at someone like the Bucks losing Jabari Parker for the entire season.
yeah, I think I can go through and just I know all the players like there. Kyle Lowry has missed time. Kyrie Irving has missed time. Kevin Love has missed time. Joel Embiid is now missing time. Victor Oladipo's missed games. John Wall, Hassan Whiteside, Giannis, and Jabari Parker. That's all teams in the East. Okay, and then that's all 8 playoff teams in the East, and then in the West, you had Chris Paul and James Harden miss time. You've had Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Kevin Durant all miss time. Portland, you've had Yusuf Nurkic miss a lot of time. Oklahoma City, you lost Andre Robertson for the year, who was a really big part of their defense. New Orleans, obviously, you had DeMarcus Cousins. San Antonio, you've had Kawhi all year, and now you have LaMarcus Aldridge and Tony Parker for a lot of the year. Minnesota, you've had Jimmy Butler. Utah, you've had Rudy Gobert. Literally, all 16 playoff teams have had injuries to one of their starting players.
Yeah,
Every single.
and I would love to see a study on how many games have actually been lost to starters versus reserves, and if like it's a specific disparity between playoff teams and non-playoff teams this year, because it is absolutely ridiculous that like all of these teams are getting hit with injuries, and even still, like it's not evening out. If you just look at someone like the Warriors versus someone like the Heat, like even the Heat losing Whiteside, so gosh, it's just absurd.
Yeah, I mean, injuries this year have absolutely they've kind of plagued everything that's been going on this year. I mean, but I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is. I can't remember. I can't remember any year actually where. I guess 2016 was the last year where an injury didn't really derail anything in the playoffs.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I guess that'd be the last one. But I mean, I guess you can't even really say that for sure because the whole Steph Curry injury, people love to use as an excuse for why they didn't win the finals. But I mean, I don't agree with it. But everyone will find something.
yeah, and like you'll see articles come out afterwards where, like originally he would say, "Oh, I'm 100% heading into this Thunder series," or "Oh, I'm 100% heading into the Cavs series," and then right after he loses, he's like, "Oh, I was actually 70% or 60%, and I was just kidding." But
Yeah, exactly. Like he came out like a couple of days after the finals and he said, "Okay, so like this is hypocrisy, right? Like this is stupid. Like his first game back against the Portland Trailblazers from that MCL sprain, Steph Curry, he bellowed on the floor. He yelled, 'I'm back.' He scored 41 points and he set an NBA record for points in an overtime with 17 points in overtime. Okay, they won the game. They beat Portland in five
I'll be
games.
I'll be right back. I gotta go to the bathroom.
Oh yeah, go ahead. And just to continue, yeah, they went 4-1. They beat Portland. He scored 17 points in overtime. He scored 41 or 44 or some really high total for the game. But then he yelled, 'I'm back.' No one was worried. He told the media and everything that he felt great. He felt fine. And then they had the 7 game series against Oklahoma City, and then they had the 7 game series against Cleveland. And then when they lost to Cleveland, reporters asked him immediately after the game, and the first thing he said was, 'Yeah, I wasn't 100%, but it doesn't matter.' So I don't really understand why he would go out on the floor and shout things like 'I'm back' and all that stuff if he wasn't 100%. Because I don't really feel like you can just one day be completely fine and then all of a sudden, as soon as you lose, it's a problem. So that was just a little bit dumb. One of my least favorite things, as Ryan was just mentioning, is that when players do something like, "Oh no, now I was this percent, or I was that percent, or I was this," or I mean, I don't even understand how you really even put a number on it. Like, on what basis do you say that you were 80% or 70% or 60%? Like, I mean, if you're like, you should play when you should only really. I feel like you should personally. I really feel like you should only play if you're 100%. Unless obviously, like, but obviously, sometimes there are things on the line and things that are more important to you, such as winning playoff series. And sometimes that can be commendable. Like, obviously, you have Chris Paul that one year in 2015 it was when he played Game 7 against the Spurs with a hamstring injury. But I mean, that ended up being a problem anyway because then it just missed the second round and then they didn't make the finals. So, you know, it goes both ways. But as far as injuries go, um, yeah, it can be tough. But the playoffs this year will definitely they'll be really really impacted by these injuries. And Kevin Love is in concussion protocol. He missed the game against Charlotte last night, so hopefully that's not too big of an issue because
all right, I'm back.
Get reintegrated. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry
I was just talking about how Kevin Love had concussion. He's on concussion protocol, so he's also going to be out probably maybe 2-3 games.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate that that's going to happen. But I mean, at least the Cavs are getting hurt by injuries too, I guess. Like, there's very little shining lights here with the whole injury situation. But I guess we should move past the injuries. They're sorrowful enough. And something that I'm really curious to see what you think about this because we were just talking about it. I actually had one of my questions as, do you think NBA referees should make fewer calls at the end of games? And would you like to see like an NBA where all the time in like the final 5 seconds of games, like people were getting foul calls on them? Like if Harden was going up for like a 3-point shot to win the game or something, and like it was his typical foul contact where he barely gets grazed when he gets a 3-point shot. Would you like to see the NBA start calling those, even if it's in the final 5 seconds?
Yes, I would because I feel like it's not. Sorry, I feel like it's not fair to the players to have them have to play a different way in the last 5 seconds. Like, even though a lot of people don't like James Harden's, herky jerky, whatever, dribbling, like all this ISO stuff that he does, like even though a lot of people don't like the way he plays, like that's the way he plays, and he's very effective with it. So I don't think it's fair. Like just using James Harden as an example. Obviously, you could say this about multiple players in the league, but him specifically, like if you took away his ability to draw fouls entirely in the last 5 seconds of a game, then he essentially has to change the way that he plays for the most important possession of the game, which I just don't think is fair because like a foul is a foul. Like if you get like the rules are that like if you get fouled on a shot, you get 3 or 2 shots depending on where you took the shot from. Like, and I just feel like it should be completely consistent. My problem with NBA referees isn't necessarily that they make bad calls. Like obviously you're gonna make a bad call, like that's okay. But it's just that there's no consistency. Like reputation calls, reputation non-calls, changing the rules, like changing what you call a foul when the game is tighter, or like the term that's like letting the players play. Like, no, like you should be consistent because that's all the players want too. Like even players have said, I'm not mad about a bad call. Like obviously you would love to not have a bad call, but it's not about having a bad call. It's about not getting consistent calls. So like I don't understand why it's like, and like makeup calls too. Like when referees know that they miss one, so they end up calling one on your like. That's also dumb. Like, because like you can't do any of these things when you have players who are fighting for something more important. And like maybe the only like I just like refereeing. I think should just be consistent completely. Like every game throughout the season, no matter what the time is on the shot clock, no matter who's playing. Like there should just be specific rules. Like if a player is touched on the elbow or whatever the rule is when they're going up for a shot, then they should be awarded 2 foul shots. All the rules, right? And I was watching a little bit of the Celtics Jazz game last night, and Jeff Van Gundy was talking about this, and he talks a lot, but sometimes he makes some good points. And yesterday he was saying like the clear path foul, right? Yeah. Is like apparently like it's like the worst call like in the like I think you get the it's a turnover, you get the ball back or something like it's a turnover and the other team gets the ball back at half court, like they get to inbound under their own hooper, whatever it is, and like. That rule shouldn't be that much different than a simple foul in transition when a guy is all by himself. Like, and then people do that all the time to slow down fast breaks and stuff. So I just wish refereeing was consistent because there's no like LeBron James, right? Like he goes to the rim so many times but it's literally like a 50-50 coin flip whether or not he's going to get a foul call. Like it really doesn't make any sense. Like why is it that sometimes when he drives and he gets grabbed, he gets called, and then sometimes when he drives and people grab him, he doesn't? Like, and you can't do that thing where it's like, oh, he's LeBron, I expect him to finish that. Like,
Yeah.
you can't do that. Like James, like if LeBron drives as hard as, and I'm not sure if he drives as many times as, but he definitely drives with enough power and force and like, you know, intent to score the ball as James Harden does. But James Harden shoots 10 free throws a game, and LeBron I think shoots 6, something like that. Like and LeBron is driving more this year than he has. I think this is the third most drive attempts per game of his career. I'm not entirely sure, but it's one of the higher ones. And he's shooting, I think, the one of the lowest 3 free throw attempts of his career. So it just doesn't make any sense. And LeBron made a comment about the officiating that I completely agree with. And he said that they're more like the refereeing now is more aimed to protect the shooter. Like you have rules about closeouts, which you should obviously, and like you like a simple tap on the elbow after a player gets their shot off completely is all automatically called a 3 point foul, a 3 point 3 free throws. So like it's just the rules now are just weird and like that's the reason why I feel like you should be able to reverse calls, right? Or even like the NFL has this where you can challenge a flag, right? Like you can
Yeah.
challenge a call. Like an NBA coach should, like a head coach should maybe get like maybe you give them like like one challenge a quarter, right? Where like maybe not a quarter, like maybe you give them like two challenges in the last you give them one challenge in the last 2 minutes of each quarter, something like that, whatever it may be. Like you could figure that out, however. But like for example, like can you imagine how effective it would have been if Tyronn Lue could have called a challenge on the play where LeBron was fouled by Kevin Durant in the last, or in the NBA Finals when they had momentum, right? And he could have challenged to get that shooting foul on Kevin Durant, right? So like I feel like something like that. There's just something that makes it so that the calls can be changed because like it doesn't make any sense that you can reverse possession of the ball, you can change time on the clock, you can change whether you count something as 3 or 2, you can change a flagrant 1 to a flagrant 2, you can call something a regular foul, you can call something a common foul or a clear path foul, but for some reason you can't revert, like you can't take away a foul call. Like just because you call it on the floor and then you go and you review it and then you see obviously that it's not a foul, why is it that that has to stand a foul? Like it doesn't make any logical sense. So that's basically my biggest problem with officiating is that there's no consistency and that it's all over the place. And they sort of like referees can literally just change the outcome of a game based on how well they do their job, which is just ridiculous. And like to a degree, that's always going to be the case to a degree. But there's definitely things that can be done to mitigate it, and I just don't see any of them getting done, which is just irritating as a fan.
Yeah. So right now I'm going to bring my refereeing experience into this because I think that'll really help out. You guys are going to be getting a lot of this in the next week. I'm doing a podcast with Logan on Monday, I believe, where we're almost exclusively going to be discussing our experiences in soccer refereeing. But I guess you're going to get a
Cool.
sneak preview of that.
Yeah.
So for me, like the whole thing where like you're letting players play at the end of games, I've never understood that. Maybe it's just the soccer thing, but it seems like if you see a foul call, you call it. Like, could you imagine in like the last 5 minutes of like a soccer match, someone's offsides and you don't call the offsides? Like that's insane if you even know what that means. But like it would just be it'd be bizarre, and like the fact that in other sports we treat it differently. We say, "Oh, you just got contacted," but it's the end of the game, so you should be able to push through it. That's ridiculous. Now the makeup call thing that one's bad. Like if as a referee you think you actually screwed up a call, it is really hard to referee unbiased from that point on. Like I've had experiences where like a coach will I've had one coach where he had a really bad habit of I don't even know if it's a habit or maybe he's just an asshole or something. He would always like with his fingers, like when he thought he saw a foul call, he would like get his fingers and like blow a whistle with it, and like that would really piss me off. And like when like a bad foul call happened right in front of him, I refused to make the foul call, and that was a really bad thing to do. I probably shouldn't have done it, but like it's incredibly difficult to referee in an unbiased way, and that's what really separates the really good refs from the bad ones, and that's why the people in the NBA who like the top of the flight refs, they have to be on their game. And like part of the problem is with the refereeing union. I don't know if this is the way it is in the NBA, but in other sports leagues, it definitely is. The the refereeing union makes it incredibly difficult to fire a referee based on their performance. So like if you have a crappy referee, I know there's like in the MLB there's always like this one umpire that cannot get fired because the union refuses to let him be fired based on his performance because they're like, oh well, he's allowed to call the strike zone how he wants. If it's bad, that's his decision. So like it's very hard to fire someone based on poor performance. So you just get these crappy refs that are in the league year after year. And if you look at someone like I don't know who that female referee is, like she's not bad, but if all of a sudden like she just turned into like the worst NBA ref out there, it would be very difficult for the league to fire her because the refereeing union would contend, oh no, she's female. Are you firing her because she's
Well, yeah,
female?
Lauren Goldcamp, yeah.
Yeah, like it'd be incredibly difficult to do that, and you see that every time there's even comments made from the players, like, "Oh, she was not listening to what the coach was saying or something." And they're like, "Oh, you just said that because she's female."
Exactly. That's one of my most irritating. Like Lauren Holtkamp, I know you just said she's not that bad a referee, and obviously, it's subjective, but like a lot of the games that like she seems really like she seems too like she seems too engaged emotionally, like, and it's because like it has nothing to do with the fact that she's female. Like she makes technical foul calls like just kind of whenever like Draymond Green is notoriously like an emotional player, but there was one play specific. His mouth was bleeding. Like he was literally bleeding, and he was talking to Lauren Holtkamp, and he was being calm. Like he was like why didn't you call that? Like I'm literally bleeding. Like someone hit me in the face and you didn't call it foul. Like he was just trying to get an explanation, and she was like, Draymond, 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 I can't talk to you. Stop talking to me. Like you can't do that. Like and like I completely like that's one of the most irritating things to me is when people say that she can't referee. Like if someone's critiquing her on her refereeing ability, it has nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. It's literally just that she didn't make the right call or she's not. Like you're saying, yeah, like that's completely true.
Yeah, and it's incredibly difficult to criticize someone in that situation, especially because even if she was one of the worst refs in the league, I don't know that the NBA should necessarily get rid of her just because it's such an important thing to have her stick around just so that women are even looking at being referees at the highest level. Like, just from my experience, even doing soccer refereeing at the lowest level, like it's something like 20 to 15 to 20% of referees are female, and that's at the absolute lowest level where like there's and basically nobody cares if you do a good job and like I mean
Yeah,
obviously you'll get yelled at or something, but if you leave after you leave the game, nobody's gonna remember that you had a bad game or something, and like even
yeah,
still you see very few female involved in it, so like it comes like it also like parallels the really weird issue of affirmative action where like should you be allowing people of race that has historically performed worse into college just so that you can get them to, in a Booker T. Washington sense, cast down their bucket.
exactly. See, like, yeah, but like the one thing, like, and tell me if you agree with this. So I think that for prior to the playoffs, right? The whoever's at top of the NBA, like whatever, like whoever the people are, like the league office or whoever it may be, they need to go through. They need to go through the foul, like for like, and this is going to sound extremely excessive, but they need to go through every single game officiated by every single referee, and they need to determine who called the most correct calls and who called the least incorrect calls because that's just it's literally like statistics for referees, like who makes the best calls, who's the best referees, who made the most correct calls and who made the most incorrect calls, and then all the referees who made all the most correct calls, those are the officials that you need in the playoffs. Those are the officials that you need especially in the NBA finals. Like the three best referees in the league in terms of who made the most correct calls and combined with basically the percentage of their calls that were correct, right? And then there should be like a minimum criteria for how many calls, right? Like let's say like I don't know how many foul calls are in a game, but whatever. Like there needs to be like a minimum criteria of how many calls you made, and then the referees who called the highest percentage of correct calls, the three highest, should be the three referees who officiate every NBA Finals game. You can pay them more to do it. You can like whatever it may be if they don't want to try. Like I'm not sure if I've seen this entirely because I haven't paid that much attention to the referees in the two NBA Finals that I've watched, but I'm not entirely sure that they keep the same referees throughout the series. But I really feel like you should because with all the dumb stuff that they have in the league, where it's like, oh, like feel of the game and like reputation calls and makeup calls and all that stuff. If you're a referee, right, like then like if you're officiating the whole series, then you get much more consistency in the series because it's the same referees making the same calls and they're more likely to call the same calls, right? Like
Yeah.
so then like basically a player will know, right? Like if they start a series in game one and and the ref didn't give them a call, then they know kind of what to avoid and they kind of know like he's not going to call that, like I can try something different. Like obviously that's not the way it should be, but it's another advantage for the players to make it a more like proper series, like just so they get a better feel of the series. So it would definitely be excessive to have to go through every single call made, obviously, but they should start keeping tab of that after every single game so that it's not such a grind when you go back through it. And like the best referees need to be in the most important games. And not to say that every game isn't important, but obviously when like games that are like like a few nights ago the Spurs were playing the Jazz and like even like Bleacher Report and ESPN, they were all they were all describing it as an extremely important game for playoff seeding. Like games like that, you need to have better refs. Like you need to have the better. Like, you can't just have the worst ref in the league who's made more incorrect calls than every other ref in the league be officiating more important games. Like you can't have that. So I really think that this is something that should be looked at. And while I'm on this topic, another thing, this also might seem a little strange to say, but I feel like it's extremely important. All referees, I think, they should have like I'm not sure. Maybe they already have this, and we just don't know about it. I think referees should have physicals done to make sure that they can properly and like in a timely fashion
Yeah,
run up and
that's
down
already
the
done.
huh?
That's already done. Like they test them for their physical.
And like they test like do they test their eyes and everything too?
I don't know about the eyes, but I know they test like their cardio and make sure that they can actually keep up with the players and like that
Okay,
they're.
yeah, because like Joey Crawford, like when he in his last couple, like there's no way. That's the thing that you were talking about firing referees, right? Like you can't fire Joey just because he's getting old, but at the same time, you can't put Joey out there in important games when he can't get up the floor. Like you can't. And I don't know about the eyes, but I've never seen an NBA official wearing glasses. And they need to have their eyes be 20/20 so they can properly see everything, so they don't get blurred vision and like when players start collapsing off a pick and roll, like referees, that entire issue needs to be addressed. Like in terms of who makes the best calls, the most correct calls, the best percentage of correct calls, their physical standings, their vision, and yeah, like I'm sure maybe Joey Crawford passed his physical when he started being an NBA referee in 1980 or whatever, but he was reffing up until 2015, and you can't tell. Like I can't believe that like you couldn't convince me that his cardio did not drop at all in 30 years. Like
Yeah, no, and I understand that concern. And at least in soccer, I can't say if this is true in the NBA, though I would think it would be. You have to every year you get reassessed on for like what grade you are. Like there's 1 through 8 on like what grade you are, and that determines what level of soccer you're allowed to do. Like Premier League, U.S. national games, just academy games, travel games, whatever. And like
yeah,
you have to get your physicals checked, and you have to be able to do like a certain time in like a man U sprint, which is yeah, basically just suicide sprints. You have to be able to. I'm sure like there's an eye test or something. So like they do that every year in soccer, and like I don't know if they do that in the NBA, but if they don't, they definitely need to be because yeah, you can't have someone like Joey Crawford tripping over his own feet and like trying to get up the court and then missing a call because of it.
and like another thing, like James Harden complained about this earlier in the year. Like there was a game that he was playing against the Clippers, I think, and every standard NBA game is refereed by three officials. Their game only had two
Yes,
referees,
I saw that. Yeah.
and everyone on every talk show and like every like sports radio, like everyone was saying, "Oh, come on, like that's not a big deal." Like, yes, it is. Like, if like how do you like because sometimes when there's a call on the floor, all three referees convene and they talk about it, and
Yeah.
they talk about like whatever it is. Like they reference like they go to each other for reference on certain calls when one of them didn't see it. Right? If you have three, obviously that changes it from being two. And like if I'm a player, right? Like obviously I want the best chance of getting the correct calls. So like, and the fact that the NBA didn't even see an issue with that was that was upsetting to me because like you're a professional league and like you don't have like a I guess you should have maybe at least one backup referee or something like in case something happens like whatever it is, or honestly maybe you can implement four referees into every game like two on each side of the court or whatever it may be. So that way that that way when when teams are in transition, you can have like a referee can see everything from behind, from one side, from the other side, and then from looking at them head on or whatever it is. Like I think three is I don't really know if it always covers like the entire range of vision or whatever it is, but like I don't know. They just need to figure something out, and like they really need to be able to I guess get clearer looks and stuff. Maybe just have another set of eyes, like because like I mean this happened a long time ago, but like there are legitimate arguments as to like Dirk Nowitzki would have two NBA championships if it weren't for referees in 2006.
Well,
Like,
they still would have screwed up the calls because I'm sure they were on orders from the league. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you know about the whole 2006 conspiracy with
yeah,
the Heat.
yeah,
Yeah. Like that kind of thing. But
like
like
you don't
even
screw
so,
up
but
that
yeah,
many
yeah. I guess in
calls.
that case, I guess it wouldn't really help because they'd be on orders from the league. But still, like, I mean, what I in simple games when it really is the referee's fault, like I can just think of instances right off the top of my head where I was watching a game and I was like wow, like the refs completely screwed up that game. Like this was I think last season or maybe it was this season. No, I think it was last season because this was the beginning of last season. The Warriors were playing the Pelicans and Draymond Green clearly had a reach and foul on Anthony Davis that ended up costing them the game. Anthony Davis, who never yells at the referees, was clearly pissed off. He started yelling at the refs, and he was correct. He definitely got fouled. So he started yelling at the ref. So the Warriors had the ball, and then he got a technical foul call, and then the Warriors got the ball back because there was a turnover, right? So the Warriors turned the Pelicans were leading by one, and then it ended up being a 4-point swing the other way because of the technical foul, and then Steph Curry hit the three, and then they ended up losing the game. The Pelicans ended up losing the game. So like when you have stuff like that, like it's just like if like I personally by nature I'm not that competitive of a person, but if you're in the NBA, you're obviously competitive, and that probably drives you crazy that like something that's 100% out of your control is dictating how well you're able to do. Like that would drive me insane if I was super competitive. So I just think that the refereeing situation in the league like it needs to be completely reevaluated just in terms of everything.
Yeah, and honestly, with that whole thing about the technical fouls, I wonder if they should just make it so, literally, like you can't give a technical foul for a player talking to a ref in a way the ref doesn't like it. Like the point of the technical foul is for players that are either flagrantly fouling somebody or like they actually touch the ref. But if the player's just like chewing the ref out about a bad call, you accept it and you move on. You don't give them the other team some points. Like that's a big deal. Like I couldn't imagine if like somebody hated my call on the field and then I just said, okay, let's give them possession down the field and let's give them a direct free kick from this point. Like that's
Exactly.
ridiculous.
Like and also like I mean I guess maybe to a degree like if the player is being like ridiculously like if they're like swearing at you like intensely and like saying like the F word like 20
Well,
times
at
like
that point,
okay
like their team would come over and just pull them over.
yeah right but like I mean I guess like I agree with you to the sense that you cannot like maybe there could be a limit maybe like you can only call one or something because like there have been some games where like they give like refs are just giving like Joey Crawford, we were just talking about him. He gave Tim Duncan a technical foul
Yeah,
for
I saw
laughing
that. Yeah.
on the bench. Like how? How can you do that? And then I don't think you should be able to give a referee a technical foul unless they're like trying to physically approach you. Doc Rivers had an issue with that one time. But like Greg Popovich is an extremely emotional head coach. You can't give him a technical foul and award the other team points and then kick him out of the game because. And another thing, you shouldn't be able to eject just because of two technical fouls. Like that's ridiculous because like Draymond Green, right, is an extremely important player. So um, to the Warriors. So just because he swears at you twice, you can't give him two technical fouls and kick him out of the game in the second quarter because your feelings are hurt. Like you can't affect outcomes of a game because of your bias or because of your sensitivity or anything like that. Like I don't know. Like there's just so many things that need to be addressed. Or and like this is another one of those things that I was talking about that the NBA could definitely fix if they took the time to do so. Like they should just send like a message out to every single NBA team that like for every time that you are seen or reported at and like refs should get to do like a write up after the game and like kind of like when you had a substitute teacher in elementary school and they would write down like anything that any student did that was bad. They could write down like any player that like swore at them or anything, and they could be like on an I guess you wouldn't do it on an honor system, but like whatever. And then just you could just find players every time that they have a like that you can see them yelling at the ref or something or like because basically any time that there's an intense altercation between a player and a referee, you can see it because you'll see like the player approaching the referee and like yelling at them or whatever. So anytime you see any sort of misconduct like that, you can just find them. But like awarding the other team points because of something that has absolutely nothing to do with basketball makes no sense.
You know what? I completely agree with you there, and it is just the concept of it is absolutely ridiculous of the technical foul. Now, my thing with the two technical fouls meaning you're out, I think if we got rid of these petty technical fouls, or like where
Yeah,
like
yeah,
if you have something like Ben Wallace just looking at the ref wrong and he gets a technical foul, if we got rid of that, I think two technical fouls
yeah,
and
yeah.
you're out is
Okay, yeah.
fine.
That's I agree with that. That's what I meant. Like I meant in the sense of
Yeah.
like you were saying, like if they physically touch the ref twice, then of course, yes, definitely technical foul. Yeah, you can kick them out of the game. Or if like they flagrantly foul someone or like do something completely unnecessary, like aim to harm a player, like, then yes, like that makes sense. But
But
I mean flagrant one fouls, in my opinion, flagrant one fouls. The penalty for them I think is a little excessive. Isn't it two free throws in possession of the ball?
yeah, I think that's fine. Like if you see some of those
I
fake
think it should be. I think that a flagrant one, like
maybe
it
like one free throw.
maybe one, yeah, like because I mean, like two free throws in possession of the ball can be like that can be a 5 point swing just because you accidentally hit someone in the face. Like,
Well,
I mean,
I don't really see those flagrant one fouls that are like they seem super petty. Like, do you see those often?
not like I guess not recently, but a couple months ago, I was watching a game where Blake Griffin, he accidentally like he it was clearly an accident. Like it was plain as day. Like he was in the air and he was just coming down, and his forearm he hit Taj Gibson across the face, and he ended up getting ejected. Like
Oh,
how can you do that? Like that. Like I just think maybe you can keep the penalties the same, like two free throws on the ball, but like it doesn't really make sense to me. The only difference between a flagrant one and a flagrant two is that with a flagrant two, the player gets ejected, but the basketball penalty is the same. Why is that? Why do you even call it a flagrant one and flagrant two? If flagrant two is like the classification to have a flagrant two is different. Like I think the only difference is that a flagrant two has to show intent, and then a flagrant one does not. And then flagrant two you get ejected, and then flagrant one you don't.
mm. Well, first of all, how was your intent in that Blake Griffin play?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm like that's this just goes back to the entire thing that we were just saying about referees and just kind of choosing what to like. There wasn't any intent. He was, but I guess the referees viewed it as though he was intentionally like on his way down. He was like aiming to hit his forearm in Taj Gibson's face. But I mean, like honestly, like basically, what I would equate that to is, did you see the play yesterday where Markelle Fultz fell into Joel Embiid's head?
Oh yeah, yeah,
It'd be like them calling a technical foul on Markelle Fultz for hurting his own teammate.
yeah. That's
Oh, also, this
ridiculous.
was another ridiculous thing. While we're on that note, there was a game in Minnesota where they gave Tom Thibodeau a technical foul for yelling at his own player.
Oh, it's funny.
It's funny, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
it's
it's
like, wow,
terrible.
like really, can you like he was yelling at Karl Anthony Towns or something, and they gave him a technical foul for yelling at his own player. Like that's ridiculous.
I want to see the video of that. I want to see what Thibodeau was like with the ref.
Yeah, I don't remember how he reacted,
Can I
but
do my job?
yeah, like actually, like seriously though, like I mean, the refereeing situation is kind of gotten out of hand, but I mean, I guess at the end of it, there's always going to be problems with the refs, but there just definitely shouldn't be this many.
Yeah, so I never really got a chance to address most of those points actually, so I'm just gonna go back through some of those. So on the point that the NBA should rank the refs for every game instead of just the final 2 minutes, and then based on that assemble them to formulate the playoff crews instead of doing it based on seniority, basically. I definitely agree with that, but the problem there is the refereeing union already has a huge problem with the 2 minute report, and I don't know how the NBA would be able to get away with ranking the refs the entire time and then having it determine the playoff thing. Like I could see there being a referee strike based on that. Because like if you think about it, the NBA refs are completely within their power there, and if you're a ref, you do not want that happening. But
Yeah, I suppose, but I mean, like at some point, the referees I feel like should also want integrity of the game, and like if you made that many mistakes, then you should be willing to understand that you don't deserve to ref an NBA Finals if you made that many mistakes. Like it's literally just like any other aspect of life. Like if you make that many mistakes, you don't get to do what you want. So
sure, but it's very hard to
it would be
determine
difficult. Yeah.
what is a foul and what isn't a foul already, and then to have the referee's livelihood staked on the fact that the league happens to agree with you on a specific foul call is weird because especially with some of those let's use the LeBron example again. LeBron's going up to the rim and there's like just this amount of contact and you're right on the edge on if it should be a foul call or not, and the league sees LeBron as like somebody that shouldn't be deserving of extra foul calls, while this particular ref agrees with us, and he's like, no, if you get a specific amount of force against you, then you should have the foul called for you. Then this ref is getting penalized because of how he sees the rule set, and he's not necessarily wrong in his view, but he's being penalized as if he was.
See,
I'm not saying it's not a good policy to rank him, but I'm saying it's a very difficult process.
yeah, no, I get what you're saying, but the reason, like, the only way I can see it working is because the sample size would be so large that I feel like there wouldn't be that, like, there would probably be maybe like 30 instances a season where a ref has, like, for each ref. So, like, given how many foul calls they call, like, it's like, I guess it would sort of even out with how many good calls they've made, because to some degree, like, with a sample size of 82 games and then plus the playoffs when you're deciding refs for the NBA Finals, then to, like, I think that I agree with you. It'd be a completely difficult process because, like, the referees association they seem like a really sensitive, like, I mean, like I don't understand why, like, if you made the wrong call and it cost the team the game, then I'm sorry, but you should be criticized because you cost the team the game. Like, like, it doesn't really make any sense. And they don't even call out the referees by name or anything. Like, they just say referees. They don't they don't call out a referee and say, like, Joey Crawford or Monty Williams, like, whatever. Like, they made the wrong call, or, like, they just say that a wrong call was made. Like, they never call out the ref. So I don't really understand why they're so sensitive about the 2-minute report. But you're right. Like, they are super, like, they really don't like to be attacked. So it would be very difficult. But at the end of it, I personally feel like it'd be a big enough sample size to choose. But they would be really opposed to it. That is true.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. They are super sensitive to it, but I feel like this is the same argument for uh, just in all these sports leagues and negotiating, where you never want to give up any power that you have, even if you think that you're wrong in having that power. Like if you look at something like MLB, where like you have these crazy rules for like how you can pay minor league players, where you can go way below the minimum wage and like pay them like $10,000 a year or whatever they're making, which is clearly illegal and should be punished under law. But because of the antitrust exemption within the Supreme Court, the MLB gets to get away with it. And you'll never hear an owner complain about this system because they're like, well, it gives us power and it gives us more money, so why should we complain about something that helps us? And like it's super hard to be moral in a system like this, and when you're trying to create a moral system where people are meritably are awarded playoff games based on their merits and like how good they were in the season, that's really difficult. But no, I agree. If somehow you're in an ideal system, or the NBA union, the refereeing union can get behind this, and like the NBA can give some concession to the referees, maybe more pay or something, then sure, like that'd be fantastic. But that's really difficult to pull off. And luckily, I think the NBA doesn't have to worry about it nearly as much as other leagues. Like if you look at the baseball with someone like Angel Hernandez, where literally every year he's refereeing, umpiring the World Series, and like he's doing a horrible job, and you can't get rid of the guy. Like it gets a lot worse than what the NBA has.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, so that's ranking. I don't really remember any of. Oh yeah, there was this point. So something that really irks me about NBA games is when so you know how like in the final 2 minutes or whatever it is, whenever a basket gets scored, the clock stops and then it starts again once the ball's inbounded.
Yeah.
That really annoys me that that's not done for the entire game. Because like you'll be watching the game and like it won't happen. Like they'll just keep the clock running, and it just feels like it's BS. Like, oh, okay, why are we bothering to do this at the end of the game then if we're not going to do it for the entire game? Is it just you don't actually care about the time? And if you don't actually care about the time, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I mean, the refs just honestly, just thinking about it is just, it's irking because, like, there are just so many things that aren't. And, like, another thing, this is a little bit I mean, this is, I guess, in a way it's related, but not entirely. Like, I feel like either the NCAA or the NBA, they need to adjust their rules. I think in a little bit of accordance like to one another because like like college players who come into the league are like they're used to a completely different set of rules. So it's like like all the stuff with like defensive 3 seconds and the like the inbounding thing that you were just
Actually,
talking
can you
about.
summarize the difference in the rules? Because I actually don't know any of them.
Okay, so basically in the NCAA, so you know how you were just saying that like after an inbound, like sometimes they take time off the, you know what I'm saying, like like what you were just saying.
Yeah, like the sometimes the clock is stopped and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, so in the NCAA, the clock is never stopped. Like after a shot, like they don't stop the clock when like while you're inbounding. Like time runs while you inbound the ball.
Oh my God.
So it's stressful. Like so basically, like I was watching a game right, and like it was it was the game. Loyola Chicago hit that game winning shot, but after the shot went through the net, um, there was still like zero point 0.4 seconds. But because time keeps running, the player like he didn't have enough time to inbound the ball and stop the clock. Point, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like your time to inbound the ball is part of game time, which I think makes sense. So that's different. In the NCAA, they always keep the clock running. In the NCAA, you get five fouls before you're fouled out instead of six.
Yeah, which
Um,
makes sense
and,
based on the time.
and defensive 3 seconds is not a rule in college.
Hmm.
So because they allow zone in college, they don't allow it in the NBA. But
Yeah, to some extent.
yeah, and so like, and there are some other smaller ones that I'm not entirely sure because I don't watch that much college basketball. But I just feel like the rules should be in accordance with one another because and because like just for players who are just entering the league, right? Like it would just I think it would make it easier for them to do a little bit better because I mean like with players who are adapting to a completely new thing, being in the NBA, I guess every advantage that they can get makes it a little bit easier. So um, yeah. Oh, 1 second, Ryan. I'm gonna mute my mic. My mom is calling me.
Yeah, sure. And no, I'm with Aradh there. It makes absolutely no sense that the two, well, you know what? It makes complete sense because the NCAA is by no means required to have the same rule set as the NBA. It's two completely different entities. But it doesn't make it weird when the NBA is trying to support college basketball by keeping NBA players within the college system for at least 1 year for rules like the one and done rule. That's a little weird, but at least it seems like that's going to be gotten rid of in the coming years. It seems like Adam Silver isn't particularly on board with that, but we'll see. With Adam Silver, as we mentioned earlier, he has a lot of good ideas, but he doesn't implement very many of them. But yeah, it is weird that they have two completely different systems. It's better than college football to just NFL football, but it still sounds pretty bad. With the defensive free second rule, it seems like you should have. I'm not actually sure. I'm gonna have to ask Rod if he thinks that you should have to get out of the paint or not for after standing it for 3 seconds, because that's an interesting thing. That does sound like a holdover from the NBA's anti-zone rules from prior to the 2001 2002 season, where you literally couldn't stand between two players without defending either of them. And that was something that we brought up in our arguments on why Michael Jordan had an easier time in the NBA than LeBron does today, not having the zone defense, and why, at the very least, we should be viewing him the same. But yeah, that's really weird. And here, let me just text Arati, let me know that he has to go help his grandfather with something. So let me let him know. Cool, I'll vamp for 5 minutes. So I'll just let you guys know. I was planning on having Samson on Friday, but not Friday, Monday. But I had to reschedule because I found out that I was having a college trip to Case Western, a school that I applied to, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, like it's been interesting because I had to reschedule on Wednesday as well because flight got delayed for getting back. We're planning on talking about our experiences together as partners for Gizman, but yeah, that went great at Gizman. We actually won head delegate, which was amazing. I've been trying to win head delegate for like essentially all the years that I've been doing Gizman, and the best I was able to get before was just a vocational award, which that's kind of crappy. That's basically fifth place out of like 20 people. So that's not great. But we're super proud that we actually won it, and he got a gavel, I got a certificate, and yeah. But I suppose we should probably get back to the NBA. So I'm planning on recording with Rod in a week and a half. He's going on like some siesta for spring break. No clue what that is. I never am involved in that kind of stuff, but whatever. And I'm also recording with Zach Sherman in a week and a half. I haven't recorded with him since the NBA All-Star Special. We all kept busy schedules, I guess. But the plan for that is we're going to go straight into LeBron James debate because I really have been waiting to have that with him. It should be fascinating. I'm really hoping he's going to be objective about it. And what I'm afraid that's going to happen, to be honest, is he's just going to say, you know what, I have this view of LeBron James because I think he's a bitch or whatever he's going to say, which makes it basically shuts down the argument because I can't dispute his view of his personality. I mean, all I can say to him is that doesn't matter in judging a superstar and the best player ever. And he can respond with, "Oh, it matters to me." There's not much I can do about that, but I'm confident I can prove to him that LeBron James has not only set himself up to be more successful than Michael Jordan in terms of career accomplishments, but also statistics, in terms of being a better player, being a better person. And yeah, well, we'll see how that goes. But we'll also talk about the playoffs because, as I was saying with Rod earlier, playoffs are going to start pretty much right after those two recordings. And we're planning on just going through every single matchup and looking at it position by position, maybe talking about how each of the players has been, maybe doing like a bench versus bench or something, and just seeing how that goes. I'm super interested to see how that is, but I'm a little little less excited to do that now, seeing as the Eastern Conference has basically fallen apart in the process of recording this thing. Believe me, I don't know how that happened, but yeah, it seems like 76ers are starting to fall apart now without Embiid. No clue why he's not playing with that facial fracture, but whatever. Celtics have completely fallen apart. They lost. Obviously, Gordon Hayward's been gone the entire year. Kyrie Irving just left. I think they had one other injury as well. And yeah, what else? Yeah, all the other teams are doing okay. Obviously, John Wall's taking his time coming back, but that doesn't really hurt them that much. Jabari Parker's been gone for the Bucks. So yeah, I'm still excited to watch the Eastern Conference playoffs, but much more so the West right now. My plan for the playoffs is every year I always say that I'm going to watch every single playoff game in the NBA, and I never end up doing it. The farthest I've ever gotten, I think, was like a couple games, like 3 games, sevens left in the first round, and I just couldn't do it anymore because when you're watching the NBA, you're looking at an average series length of 5.5, just based on obviously the average return, the literally the X bar of the sample set. You have 4, 5, 6, 7. You just average that, and you get 5.5. You multiply that by 8, and you get what is that? That's 11 times 4, so 44 games. 41 games alone is a lot. But yeah, and like the additional problem is I always fall behind a couple days. Because like that's my other problem. I always like to be 1 or so days behind, or like a couple hours behind the live content, just because I always have a big problem with when I'm all caught up. I always worry that I'm going to want to watch it more and just not have anything to watch. But yeah, so like it becomes super hard because like in the first round you'll have like 4 games in one night, and that's a lot of commitment, especially when you're looking at like even if you fast forward through all the commercials or whatever, you're still looking at 2 hours per game, so that's like 8 hours of NBA in one day. And when you're talking about like that's during a school night as well, you're literally talking about, and like especially for me when I'm getting home at like 7 o'clock at night, you're talking about just watching NBA from literally until 3 in the morning. Like you can't do that, and that's ridiculous. But I'm gonna see if I can stick to it for a while because I'd really like this to be the year that I watched every single game of the NBA playoffs because that's another thing. Like it's not the most fun watching all the first round matchups and not getting to watch any of the good ones. But yeah, I'm super excited for the Western Conference Finals. That's gonna be amazing. I would love to see the Warriors Jazz series in the first round without Stephen Curry. That'd be really interesting. Yep, he's having some difficulties. He'll be here in another 5 minutes. So I guess I'll move on from that and talk about what is coming up for the schedule in the foreseeable future. Tomorrow night I'm recording with Andrew Truelove. We're going to be talking about anime and reviewing recent series we've been watching, Mob Psycho 100, and that should be absolutely fascinating. Because I'm really curious to see how that goes. Like, if we like doing a review series, that could continue. If we hate it, well, obviously, that's not going to be very much fun. But I took a ton of notes for it. I have a weird thing with notes. Like, I can't take notes easy. Whenever I do notes, I have to literally write down anything that pops into my head about the piece, and it literally will take me like, well, here, so I'll just look through my time tracking for doing the review of the first episode. So it took literally 3.5 hours to do the review of the first 30-minute episode of Mob Psycho 100. Now that did come from part of the problem with that was I had to review the what's in an OP for Mob Psycho 100, which takes a lot longer because I literally looked through every single visual element of the piece, and then I looked through every single like just anything that I noticed with the music, and then like all of the the themes within the piece, and it takes a while, but I'm confident that I can talk about the entire show for a while. It started off on the it started off looking kind of chaotic and like a little too much like it was trying to be too off the wall and be like, look at us, we're a kooky show and we're called Mob Psycho 100 and we're gonna be what you see on your hallucinogenic drugs or whatever. But yeah, I'm starting to enjoy it, and like Mob's becoming a really cool character after a little bit. So yeah, and I'm curious to see what Andrew's gonna think. I've tried to avoid talking to him about it, so yeah, maybe he'll like it too. In terms of what else is going on, geez, I'm getting all the updates. I'm sorry, I put my phone right next to the microphone. Here, I guess I should tell you what that update was for. That was for reaching 80% battery life on my phone, and I don't remember if I've talked about this before, but something that I follow pretty religiously is, it's funny because I'm an atheist, is if just charging my phone and making sure that it always is below 80% and above 20%. And that's because of studies that I've seen where lithium ion batteries, if they reach above 80% capacitance, they start to become too big for.
Hey, sorry about that.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I was talking about my religious fascination
Hello?
with. Hello.
Sorry.
Just my fascination. What?
What were you saying?
Oh, sorry. I was getting an echo where like I was hearing my own voice back through the microphone. That was weird. But no,
Oh.
I was talking. I was. It got pretty deep into the vamping. I was talking about my habit of never charging my phone past 80%. So
Oh, really?
yeah, we kind of went off the deep end. But okay, I have no clue what we were talking about before this.
Referees.
Oh, okay. Is there anything left to say about referees?
Probably not. We vented all of our frustrations, I think.
Yeah, let's. Oh yeah. I forgot. I wanted to ask you a question. The viewers, listeners, are probably remembering that I mentioned right after you left. I would ask you this. So, do you think that the college rules for the defensive 3 seconds are better than the NBA's?
Yes, because I mean, I feel like any player who's like I feel like every player should be able to play however they want, and I just feel like zone defenses, like if
I
you
really
have,
needed that water.
Sorry.
I said I really needed that water.
Oh, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it's not that big of a deal because some teams can still kind of play zone without technically playing zone. But I mean, I think without the rule, like I'm kind of torn on it because you could literally just have Rudy Gobert standing at the rim for an entire 24-second possession and completely seal off the rim. But at the same time, it's sort of like you should, I mean, just like either get good enough to finish against it or just learn how to shoot from outside. So, like, it's limiting the rule kind of limits players like DeAndre Jordan, Rudy Gobert, Anthony Davis, Hassan Whiteside, Kristaps Porzingis. Like, the good rim protectors in the league are sort of limited by the rule. So, but at the same time, like, that rule is what's allowed. Like, I guess it kind of helps to make the league as guard centric as it is because, like, Like James Harden would not be the player he is if there was a big man consistently in the paint. So that also I think would bring back a little bit of a prevalence of a stretch five player because then like that's the reason that you have a stretch five anyway is to bring that big man out of the paint. So I think that it should be allowed simply because like if it's allowed at every smaller level, why do you all of a sudden make it different when you get to the highest level? It seems kind of sort of like counterproductive, but at the end of the day, it can live without being changed. But I just feel like just for consistency's sake, it should be a rule in the NBA too, or shouldn't be a rule.
Yeah, and it is. I agree with you. It's a tougher call because if you don't have it, then you have a system where like you're back in the '60s where like the center is just parked in the paint the entire time and the guards can't drive on the center at all. And like I'm concerned that even if you had like a stretch five or something, that center still stays in the paint, and they just trust the guards to play like a 5-4, 5-4 on everybody out on the paint on the perimeter and just hope for the best because they know
Yeah.
that nobody's scoring in the rim. But so like that comes down to should the rules should rules that only are meant to enhance the the watchability of the game be allowed? And it's a tough call, but I mean, really, I think you have to just almost like have it for like an entire season or like just a couple games and just test it and see like okay if we have this system is someone like DeAndre Jordan just going to dominate the entire time and nobody's going to be able to score at the rim? Is it going to be is it just going to be a boring game that nobody wants to watch, or like is it something that guards can dominate even more in? Because well, probably not, but like where the stretch five really does dominate, where like the center does have to come out of the paint to guard them. So really, I think you just have to run some tests on it. But I'd be curious to see how it would go because it would be it is absolutely just a holdover of the NBA's problems with zone defense back in the '90s.
Yeah, I mean, it just sort of like it kind of changes conversations too because like I mean, so many people say things like when comparing players across different generations, it's like, oh, he had to play against zone defenses. He didn't have to play against zone defenses. So it kind of added another layer to all of that because then they would have switched back. I mean, I feel like because the NBA has so many issues that could be fixed, it's sort of easy to pick all of them apart. But if there were fewer, like if they fix the things that surround like that, like if they fix like the fact that you can't like if they fix small things where they call like we were just talking about like they call ridiculous things fouls. So basically, I think if officiating got tighter, like and more strict, I don't think that there would be more like I think that there would be no one would really even think about whether or not there's a 3 second violation defensively. Because like I think like defensive minded big men would like love to not have a defensive 3 seconds. But then I guess you'd also have this whole issue where all the offensive players who are really good in the post would be like, oh, so how come they can stay in the post for 3 seconds on defense, but I can't stay in the post for 3 seconds on offense? Because then obviously there's also offensive 3 second violations. So that would be another issue.
Does
But
does college basketball allow for offensive 3 seconds?
I am not sure. I have not watched enough.
Here, I'll look it up.
I feel like maybe they don't because I guess I mean that would be really kind of like all the big men would just kind of kill you.
Yeah. Let's see.
Because they also have the 5 second back to the basket rule, which I think is kind of stupid. But
Yeah, what's 5 seconds back to the basket?
so basically, Mark Jackson, when he was a really good player, he was Mark Jackson, the guy he coached the Warriors
Yeah.
before Steve Kerr. So basically, he's a taller point guard. So he would essentially what he like it's kind of nicknamed the Mark Jackson rule. He would just constantly back down smaller point guards and score on them. So essentially, the NBA made a rule to mitigate it so that point guards couldn't just beat you because they're bigger than you.
Okay.
So like you can't bump your shoulder and like post someone up for more than 5 seconds, basically.
Yeah. Okay. It is in college.
But it's kind of like a long 5 seconds. It's kind of like the 5 seconds that you get on an inbounds pass, where it's like, so you don't really see that called that much, but still, it's a rule.
Yeah. And do you think that the NBA should just have like a timer that goes off after like 5 seconds if you haven't brought it in? Because like that's a weird thing with the
because
law.
the refs counting like it's like
It's
that's
like
another
6
one of those
seconds.
things that I feel like is subjective. Like they change it sometimes when the game is different. they kind of like they slow the counts down when the game is close and stuff, which is just kind of stupid. But
Yeah, and like they don't even have an actual stopwatch. They're like one, two, three. You know, like that's ridiculous. So, like
yeah, they should have a built-in timer because even if it was a stopwatch that they stopped by themselves, like there would always be user error.
yeah,
Um, it'd never be exactly 5 seconds. So, yeah, I mean, I think a timer would definitely. I mean, they kind of need that in the sense of like all the. Oh, another rule that I didn't mention that's different in college. In college, you get in college the. Let me double check on this. College shot clock. The shot clock is different.
yeah. Yes, it is. It is
Yeah,
30
shot
seconds.
clock is 30 seconds in the league, and it's 24 seconds in the 24 seconds in the NBA.
Yeah, it used to be 35 seconds actually, but that sounds like the same problem that the NBA used to have with zone defense with college basketball having a history where they used to not have a shot clock at all. And like
Yeah,
while the NBA switched to having a shot clock in the 1950s, the college basketball stuck without one until like the 1970s actually.
yeah, that's I don't really understand how that ever worked. Like, I feel like what you should do in that situation is just score the ball once and then hold it.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
So I think that does settle our argument then on if the NBA should get rid of defensive 3 seconds, and that they should have it because if a rule like the shot clock was only created to make the game more watchable, then what's the problem with defensive 3 seconds doing that too?
yeah, I think it's just I feel like it's an interesting debate because like if you changed a rule like that, like the league would change completely. Because like now, like at this point, the one thing that I don't like about the NBA right now is that like even though we have good big men, like it's like the big men have to adapt to how the guards play.
Yeah,
Like Kristaps Porzingis is not how we view him unless he can do all the things that he can do. But the only reason that he can do all the things that he can do is because the league is predicated on how well you can play like a guard.
yeah,
Like, it doesn't work the other way around where it's like we don't praise guards for being able to play like a big man, but we praise big men for being able to play like a guard. Like if James Harden had like a post fadeaway like that, I think that'd just be amazing. But like obviously, there's literally no reason for him to do that because his style of play is perfect for what the NBA is now. So I just wish it went both ways a little bit more, and it wasn't so like prevalent on like, oh, you can shoot threes, you can dribble, you can do like I sort of like LaMarcus Aldridge to me is one of my favorite players because he's kind of one of the only players who doesn't really adapt. Like he's still like like he's different because like Joel Embiid, right? Like he's a really good player in the post, but he also like he shoots a lot of threes. He's inefficient. He turns the ball over a lot. Like he plays very similarly to a guard. Even Anthony Davis to a degree, like he shoots like 52, 53% from the field, and he plays in the post, but then he also plays on the perimeter a lot. He makes plays. He handles the ball a lot. But like LaMarcus Aldridge is kind of one of those like actual throwback players where he lets Tony Parker or DeJounte Murray do all the dribbling. He goes, he finds a spot in the post, he gets the ball, he backs them in, he shoots a post fadeaway, or he goes to the rim.
yeah.
And then every now and then you'll see like he's a mid range player, and I think it's nice. It's refreshing to watch the Spurs play simply because he plays like that. And I just wish there was more of a balance between it because like, and it's all it kind of goes hand in hand in my opinion with the whole thing about how all guards now are like masquerading as shooting guards. Like Steph Curry is not really a point guard. It's just he's a point guard because of how tall he is. Damian Lillard, same thing. Kyrie Irving, same thing. Like a point guard, like traditionally, is players who you score probably maybe like somewhere between like 15 and 20 points a game, and then you get like 9 to 11 assists a game. And now it's kind of like your point guard is supposed to be able to get you 24 plus points per game, and then only like 5 to 7 assists a game. So, I mean, ideally you can do both, which Harden can do and stuff like that. But I just wish that there was kind of more of a like I guess positionless basketball is cool, but at the same time, I feel like I mean positions are a part of the game. So I just feel like I wish that there was a little bit more semblance of that still.
Yeah, and I get where you're getting at, where like the NBA incentivizes you to play the game a specific way, so all the players are going to trend that way. And I think that's one of the problems with sports, where you always will have a specific rule set, and you'll have a specific style that will better fit that rule set, and how people are always looking for new creative ways for players to play. And as you said, like you're not going to have a guard that always plays like a center, but you're going to have centers who always play like guards. So like you're always going to have players trending towards the exact same player. And unfortunately, that's not what makes sports fun. Like, nobody wants to watch a game that's full of robots. Like, they want to see a game where like anyone can play however they want and they can win. Because that's why we watch sports, to see the kinds of things that we can't do and marvel at it.
Yeah, and like also another thing is like I think the discussion of players themselves I think is really interesting on this because like you don't have influential players who can influence the way an entire generation plays often. Like like for this coming generation of like the people who are going to play in the NBA, maybe in like 10, like Steph Curry is going to be extremely important because this whole thing of like 3/2 and like analytics and like you as soon as you come up the floor you can pull up from half court and like you can try and shoot these crazy shots and like taking a bad shot, but it's only like a bad shot is only a bad shot if you miss it, like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like that whole mentality, right? Like Lamelo. I don't know. Are you familiar with like the whole Chino Hills thing and like Lamelo Ball and Lonzo Ball's little brothers?
Just them pulling up from like half court and like
Yeah,
disrespecting
yeah, yeah. You've
opponents.
seen that, right?
Yeah.
Like, like that. He's 15, right? Like, and he's very talented. I think he'll probably end up playing in the NBA. But like that's like real. Like that's actually what like people do. Like when they play at the park, like they play like Curry and like when you have a like basically the way that I view it is like that's going to be the case until there's another extremely influential player who changes it. Like the league is probably going to be that way until there's someone who's like Shaq and who comes into the league that's just like I'm huge and I'm going to bully you and I'm just gonna dominate. But like the thing is, like what's interesting that Steph Curry did, in my opinion, is that Steph Curry, like there's like anybody of any size could do what he does, but like no, like you have to be extremely huge and extremely tall to do what Shaq does. So like like you can be basically anywhere between 6 feet and 7 feet and shoot the way that Steph Curry does as long as you practice enough, right? But like regardless of how much like you can't change your height to be 7'1" and 360 pounds like Shaq. So it's gonna be interesting to me, like the only thing that I could really see like actually like changing the game is like if you have a player who comes into the league and is like just a monster defender, like in terms of and by like monster defender I mean like monster defender, like getting like 7, 8 steals a game and like 5 blocks, right? Because then it's gonna be like, oh wow, like like the thing now is defense, right?
That'd be
Like Steph Curry
incredible,
did
by the way.
that.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, it'd be really cool. Like, and honestly, I've thought about that too. Like Steph Curry he did a very smart thing. Like I'm not really sure how much I don't think that he I guess I don't think he like sat there somewhere and was like, oh, like I'm gonna take this league over and start a 3 point revolution. Like I think it just kind of came about because of his play style, right?
Yeah, yeah, of
Like
course.
so if there was a player, right, who's just strict thing, like Steph Curry's thing is like shooting, right? If their thing was defense and it's just like I'm just gonna play up so hard on guys, but I'm gonna learn how to never foul them. I'm gonna learn how to only get the ball. I'm gonna get like 10 steals a game. I'm gonna get like 5 blocks a game. I'm just gonna position myself perfectly on defense. I'm gonna draw like 10 charges a game. Like I'm gonna do all this like stuff defensively. Then the thing would be like, oh wow, like anybody, like everyone can play smart positional defense. Like oh, like if I learn how I can draw 10 charges a game, or I can only touch the ball when I'm trying to rip them, or I can get good positioning for blocks, or like a play like that's one way that someone the next kind of generational player could change the league to be different because then it'd be defensive style game. There wouldn't be as many points scored. It probably wouldn't be as fun to watch. Like that's the thing, right? Like Steph Curry's is probably the most fun one to watch, I guess. Like from an aesthetically pleasing standpoint, but I think a defensive style game could be fun because then you get so much more plays in transition, and then people get highlight dunks and transition threes, like all that stuff still happens. Or you could do it kind of in a like a Steve Nash on steroids kind of thing, where you just find one player who's just an extremely creative passer, or like someone who just they completely dominate the game by playmaking only and average like 20 assists or something. Because like that sounds insane, but then like when you think about it, like if you told someone like 15 years ago there'd be a point guard in the NBA who made 402 threes in a season, that would sound just as crazy as what I'm saying right now about someone averaging like 10 steals a game.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
so like basically, I think the league now is because of what Steph Curry's done. I feel like the league is not going to be able to change into a way where you can just where like dominance now cannot come by size because of what Steph Curry's done. Like dominance now has to come off of some specific skill that you have, um, and I think that's hurt a lot of players who were probably like Jaleel Okafor, for example, right? Like he was the third pick in the 2015 draft. His first season in the league, he had 18 points per game, 7 rebounds. But because he does not play like he doesn't play anything like a guard, and he's struggling now. He's averaging like 5 points per game and 4 rebounds, and he got traded to the Brooklyn Nets. So now it's like you can't dominate in like because I think of what Steph Curry's done to revolutionize the game. I think the only way that the league now is really going to be able to change again in such a drastic fashion is if you get another player who's ridiculously skilled and perfect at doing one thing or multiple things. Probably not multiple things though, because it's more difficult for people who are learning the game to be good at two things. But like if there's just one thing that everyone can do, right? And in my opinion, there's only so many things that in the league that one player like everyone can do, right? Like not everyone is going to have the hand talent to finish like Kyrie Irving, so it can't be that. But everyone knows how. Everyone can learn how to shoot basketball. Everyone can learn how to play defense properly. Everyone can learn how to make smart passes. So like those are some of the things that I think that it would take for the NBA to really change again. But like I don't really see that happening because the way that Steph Curry has done it seems to please a lot of people who are watching, and it's perfect for the casual fan who just likes to see turn it on and see something exciting. So until someone really, I guess, makes a full fledged effort to be like, damn, I'm going to change the league, we're probably going to be in this kind of league for a while.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And like something that always really annoys me is that it just that people they always want to do it in the easiest way, like the most obvious way that they can see. Like nobody wants to be the NBA player that's the big counterculture guy to come up with the new revolution, even though that guy would be way more successful. They want to be the guy that's doing the exact same thing as the most successful guy right now, because everyone's got this get rich quick scheme where they're like, oh, how do I get good in the NBA? Ooh, the best guy right now, he shoots a lot of free pointers. I better go shoot some free pointers too. And
Exactly.
yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it takes a massive effort to completely change how the system works and just what change it to a way that it works better for like how the rule set's designed. And like I do wonder because this was something that we talked about like 2 or 3 years ago when Stephen Curry was really becoming the god at shooting that he is now. Just what is the NBA going to look like when players don't miss and like they don't miss shots? Like what do you do on defense? Like
Exactly.
if they're just going to make the shot no matter what, like what do you do? Like are you just going to have 150-point games? Like is it even worth playing defense at that point, or should you just try and outrun the guy? Like that's a weird thing. Like, and does anyone want to watch an NBA where players don't miss shots? That seems like it would be kind of boring. Like there's no stakes. Like oh, here comes Stephen Curry. He's walking up to the 3 point line. Well, I know what's happening here. Here, let me go grab a beer out of the fridge or
Yeah,
whatever.
and
Like
like yeah, keep going.
yeah, and like it just seems like a foregone conclusion. It's not what the NBA wants, and like that's the problem with new ingenuities in terms of how the game is played. Like it's always converging to the mathematically best way to play, and right now that's the free and layups. So like that, what's his name? Daryl Morey champions with the Rockets, and like that's the perfect thing for the rule set right now. But the problem is the rule set will never keep up with the changing way of the changing play of the game. So you're always going to have the NBA and all sports converging to the rule set's ideal way of being played. So over time, you're going to have fewer and fewer so-called revolutions in how the game is played occurring. So that creates a problem, obviously. Then you're going to have the creativity in the game and just differing play styles decreasing over time, which is not ideal for the game overall. But I suppose if you have a good baseline for like what you can expect out of the game, that always helps. But no, I would absolutely love to see an NBA with like some guy who just every time he walks up to the point guard, he's just like, bam, I got the steal. Or like just some center where like every time he's getting back down, he's like, I got you, bitch, and he just swats
Yeah,
down the ball. Like that'd be really cool. But imagine an NBA where all the players are doing that. Like that wouldn't be a very fun league. But I had one other point there. Crap. Hmm. I got nothing.
um, like I think that I had a thought too, but it's slipping my mind. Oh yeah, this is what it was. So a lot of like when you watch games and like when you listen to talk shows or whatever, like they always say that this is like the most talented league in like in recent memory. And while I agree with that, it's definitely, in my opinion, the least unique league because everyone plays the same way. Like Damian Lillard is so like you could probably interchange Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, and like because Damian Lillard has, I think he's not as efficient from three, but he has the same shooting range as Steph Curry. Like if you like, I consistently watched a lot of Portland games. The one year that you and I said that Terry Stotts should have been Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
Like that year, I watched a lot of Portland games, and like he can consistently like hit from like extreme like 3 to 5 steps behind the 3 point line. Like if you put Damian Lillard on the Warriors, I don't think that much would be different.
Well, the
Portland
passing, but
would be a little bit better, but like I think if you put Damian Lillard on the Warriors, not like that much probably. Like if you had, not if you just changed them now, but like if you had brought up Damian Lillard in the
oh,
Warriors
okay, yeah,
system, basically.
yeah, I see.
If you change them now, obviously you have some differences because Steph Curry is much more efficient and his range is unmatched. But like if you put if Damian Lillard had been drafted in 2009 by the Warriors, and then like he'd been coached by Steve Kerr, brought up all that stuff, like I think there wouldn't be that much difference, right? And then like Kyrie Irving, like he's a 41% 3 point shooter. He scores that many points a game. He doesn't pass that much. Like everyone's game is so similar, and even the big men at this point, like how like I can't point to a significant difference between the games of like Anthony Davis and Joel Embiid. Like aside from maybe a little bit of a height difference, like they're really good rim protectors who can shoot the ball, score the ball in the post. Like you know, in the NBA, like previously, right? Like I guess let's just go back like 10 years ago, right? Like this is what you had 10 years ago, or I guess it wouldn't even be 10 years ago. It'd be like maybe 13 years ago or 12, whatever. It's just a couple years ago, right? You had Tim Duncan. He was fundamentally sound, would completely dominate you in the post and defensively. You had Dirk Nowitzki, who was a stretch big who could play you inside the post with post fadeaways, and he could shoot threes, and he was 7 feet tall. You had LeBron James, who could attack the rim and make plays for other people. You had Steve Nash, who would dominate you strictly with his passing ability. You had Jason Kidd, who would dominate you with his versatility. You had Kevin Garnett, who would dominate you defensively. You had Paul Pierce, who would dominate you with scoring. You had Kobe, who would dominate you with scoring. Like different players did so many different things to dominate you, but now it's just like everyone shoots threes. Like James Harden beats you with his shooting and playmaking. Steph Curry beats you with his shooting and playmaking. Damian Lillard beats you with his shooting and playmaking. LeBron, even to a degree, now beats you with his, I guess not shooting, but his driving and playmaking. Giannis beats you with his driving and playmaking. Anthony Davis and Joel Embiid both beat you with their play in the post and the rebounding. DeMarcus Cousins beats you with his play in the post and in his rebounding. Kristaps Porzingis beats you, shooting threes and rim protection, and like then you also like it's like every NBA player has another NBA player that you can really similarly compare them to. Like Jimmy Butler, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. They're not that different in my opinion.
Yeah.
Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, not that much different. I like Kevin Durant and LeBron James even to a degree. Obviously, LeBron James is a little bit better playmaker, but they're kind of like all players are like they have like equals or like players who can do all the stuff that they can do just as well, if not better than them. Like I think the only unmatched talent in the league is like it's like small stuff that doesn't really affect that much. Like Kyrie Irving's finishing ability is that unmatched, but at the end of the day, that doesn't matter because everyone ends up scoring the same amount of points as them. And Steph Curry's shooting ability isn't really matched either, but like people end up scoring the same as them. Like I just wish that the game was kind of more spread out to where like you have different players who bring different things, and like that way, like if the NBA was more like that and you put a team together with players like that, then your team would just be so much more fun to watch because you could watch one team and see so many different things. Like you can't watch Houston if you want to see a grit and grind defensive game. Like you can't. Like if you're going to watch a Houston game, you're going to see a bunch of threes, layups, and transition. You watch the Warriors, you're going to see a bunch of threes, layups, and transition. You watch Cleveland, you're going to see threes, layups, transition. You're not going to see any defense. And like it's just like I was saying earlier, like basically like there was a time before, and like also when I was listing players like Steve Nash, Jason Kidd, Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, LeBron James, Dwight Howard completely dominated the game defensively. Like three straight Defensive Player of the Year awards. Wasn't that skilled inside, but was able to dominate because of his size and his athleticism and his strength. Like you just had so many, and like Dwayne Wade, he couldn't shoot from the outside, but he could create anything inside of the arc. He could make crazy shots. He was fast. Like you just had so many different styles of play, which I feel like you don't have anymore. Like it's a rarity now to have people who can really beat you as passers strictly. Like no, I don't think anyone in the NBA can strictly beat you as a passer. Like
Yeah, maybe
maybe
Ricky Rubio, but like even he's struggling.
yeah, even he's dropped off now. Like he's only averaging 5 assists a game now, and he can't shoot from the outside. So and he's the subpar. And I shouldn't say subpar, but his only thing, most of his value now comes for his ability to defend rather than offensively. Even though like when he came into the league 10 years ago, like he was one of the most highly touted draft picks ever because he'd been playing since he was 16 years old professionally. Like it's just the league has changed so much now to where it's like you can't really dominate with what you're amazing at. Like if Steve Nash was in the league now, like he could do well because he could shoot so well, but because he wasn't a volume shooter, he'd probably be the equivalent to like someone like I don't know, like because he couldn't play any defense, so he wouldn't be Chris Paul. He'd probably be similar to Ricky Rubio, except with a shooting touch. Like, because unless you can do a set number of things in the NBA, and it's like shooting, defend, and run, like it's like you can't do much in the league now.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. And miraculously, I remembered my point from earlier, and
Yep.
it had to do with an article I was reading about why the Pacers are doing so good this year, and it made a very strong case for how the Pacers, while Oladipo, who has been great, and like obviously Darren Collison has been like leading the league in 3-point percentage, and Domantas Sabonis has been all that he has been, like him and his beautiful Lithuanian self. Like it's
Yeah.
just. Yeah. Apparently, like the Pacers are really representing the counterculture in the league and like taking over for the Grizzlies, and not in the sense that they're the new grit and grind, but what they are, they're the new long two team, and they're taking advantage of the fact that all the teams are trying to either move back away from the back behind the 3-point line or closer to the basket, and taking advantage of how defenses are structured now to work against that, and they're optimizing their system so that they're doing a 7 seconds or less offense where they're taking long twos. They're taking any shot that is available to them and just saying, okay, if the defender is not within 4 feet of me, regardless of where I am on the court, we're taking the shot. And that really represents a point that I was going to get to, that all of these systems are work in an equilibrium where even if you have the perfect optimized offense, or even if like your team literally has the best player, not the best players ever, it doesn't work for talent, but if you have the best system ever, and like the free and layup system of Daryl Morey is the perfect system, then even still the best way to run the NBA wouldn't have every team doing that, because then you're missing out on some teams that can take advantage of the fact that all defenses would be structured to play against the free and layup system. So you have a team like the Pacers that are willing to do that. Unfortunately, the long two system isn't exactly the most exciting, but I mean, it's an example of counterculture, and I think every NBA fan would agree that like the Grizzlies were always a really fun team, even if their play style wasn't fun, just because it was so different from what the rest of the league does. They would just walk up to you and grind on you and like push you around and make you really feel pressured, and like all the games would be like under 90 points or whatever, and like it was just in stark contrast to everything else in the league, and like you would always hear about players heading into the grind house, and that was like a different experience from everywhere else, and like that was a really big thing. And like now, what we have like the Jazz maybe that are picking up the mantle for the Grizzlies that have fallen apart this season. Like I think that's a big part of the problem this year. Actually, is just the Grizzlies aren't there to provide that big contrast, and like the Spurs are obviously moving away from that style too. They've very much become a free point shooting team, even if most people haven't caught on to that yet. And like even teams like the Jazz now are with Joe Ingles, and like just lining up there, and then if you have an opening, just throwing it into Rudy Gobert in the same way that the Rockets do with Clint Capella.
Exactly. See, and like I like that point that you're making because one of the knocks that I always heard about the Grizzlies was like, yeah, like their play style is cool and all that, but you can't win like that. That's simply not true. Like the reason that the Grizzlies didn't win was never because of the way that they played. It was just because as good as like their play style was so unique that and just like if you had taken the Grizzlies right from the peak of when like in like from like 2013 to like or not even I guess it'd be like 2012 to like 2016, right? Um, because like they had some dominating playoff wins.
Yeah.
Like they beat the Thunder 4-1. They beat the Warriors 4-1. They beat the Spurs twice, or not twice, maybe once, right?
Yeah.
Like the Grizzlies just never got over the hump simply because they didn't have enough talent. It was never a matter of, oh, they can't win because they play like that. Like at the end of the day, as great as Marc Gasol and Mike Conley are, they're not as good as the other players in the league. Like if you had put Kawhi Leonard right on the Grizzlies when they were at
Oh my God.
that peak,
That'd be incredible.
there's no doubt in my mind that they could have been a championship team. Or even LeBron. I guess LeBron would be interesting. Like as long as you got some like I think LeBron would ultimately work because he's big. He can grind it out defensively if he chose to. He probably would have ended up with the Defensive Player of the Year award if he ended up actually playing for the Grizzlies with such a good defense and all that. But Marc Gasol can shoot a little bit. Mike Conley can shoot. At the time, Vince Carter was coming off the bench. He could shoot. Zach Randolph, not a great three-point shooter, but he's about 35%. He can make something. Like if you had given the Grizzlies a great player during that stretch where they were doing that, they easily could have won a championship. And so the knock that you can't win unless you shoot threes and you play fast and you have that's just simply not true. Like the Grizzlies are, I guess they're not living proof anymore, but they're dead proof that you can't win. Like you can win if you change it up a little bit. And the same thing with the Pacers. Like the Pacers are just one star away from doing stuff like that. And like Tim Duncan was able to do that. That's why they won so much in San Antonio. They slowed the pace down. They played defensively. And another dumb thing. This is just going off the same point. So. I love LeBron James to death, but this was one of the stupidest things that he ever said, in my opinion. So, before the 2017 NBA Finals, a reporter asked him, "Do you plan on changing up the play style to play a little bit slower so you can slow down Golden State's offense?" And he said, "No, we're just going to play our game the way that we play." But to me, that's stupid because why would you play your way when you know damn well that Golden State plays your game much better than you do? And you know that you won the championship in 2016 playing at a much slower pace and slowing it down, and you won Game 7, 93-89. Like, just the fact that teams nowadays, and players even, like LeBron's the best player in the world, and like everyone's just opposed to like, how can you just be so opposed to changing it up and trying something different just because everyone else shoots threes? Like, I would love to see another Memphis pop up, and I completely agree with you. Even though that they're one team and they're a small market team, I definitely do think that they're like not having them around anymore has really changed the NBA because now it's like it was always like I know this for the years that I've been watching the NBA. No matter like if any playoff team was playing the Grizzlies, I would always watch that game.
Yeah.
Because it'd be like and the Warriors had so much trouble playing the Grizzlies. Every time they played them, it would always be a close game or it would always come down to like something. Like the Grizzlies were consistently a tough matchup for them because Golden State, one of the reasons for Golden State's success, in my opinion, is that they first of all, Steph Curry changed the way that the game is played, right? So he's been so influential in making so many teams 3-point centric, and they have an embarrassment of riches, so that they changed the style to be something that they're better than everybody else at.
Yeah.
If there were more teams that played like Memphis, there's no way that the Warriors would be as successful because then they'd consistently have to go on the road and they'd have to play all these grinded out games and they'd get beat up and physically. And I remember in the 2016 NBA Finals when Cleveland was actually a very, very good defensive team and they were much more physical than they are now. Like that series drove all their players crazy. Like Steph Curry threw out his mouthpiece because he was frustrated. Draymond Green he hit LeBron in the groin because of how frustrated he was. It's stuff like that is missing now from the league entirely because I would love to see the reason that Houston is so successful, right, is because they adopted the style and they're doing it just as well as Golden State is because they've surrounded themselves with so many shooters and they have 2-star players. But if you had a counterculture system like Memphis, like we were just talking about, and you put stars who exceed in that role, then it could be the same thing. Like if I were let's say that if you built a super team out of grinded out players who can play really good defense, right? You can't if you put let's say this is just off the top of my head, right? Patrick Beverly, Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, Rudy Gobert, and Taj Gibson, right?
Oh
and
my
you gave them
God.
a really good bench.
That sounds
that team
amazing.
would probably be a contending team.
Yeah, definitely. No, I really want to see that team play. I'm such a defensive-minded guy myself. Like that sounds like a perfect team for me. But no,
Yeah, I just made it up, but you probably need maybe someone a little different than Beverly just for
yeah,
playmaking. purposes. But
Maybe like
like,
Chris Paul, but
yeah, he's defensive minded. That's the only reason he came to mind. Like, I mean, even like, I guess I mean, in theory, I'm trying to think of a tall point guard who can shoot the ball and play defense, but they don't really exist that much.
maybe like get Ben Simmons or something.
But yeah, I guess he'd be the best option, but he can't shoot a lick. So,
Yeah.
uh, whatever it is, like if you got that, if you put that team and then like you gave them a playmaker and some shooters, like they would just beat up the Warriors. Like they would slow them down. They would defend them so well. They would be able to score at the pace that they want to score. Like, a well balanced offense with an amazing defense, I think, is probably the key to beating the Warriors because that's what beat them in 2016. That's how they lose every time on the road when they're playing a close game. Like you never see the Warriors losing a game where the score is like in the 120s or 130s. Like when every time you see the Warriors lose a game, it's in the low 100s, in the high 90s, and the sometimes the low 90s. Um, Except obviously in that one instance against Christmas on Christmas against Cleveland, where the whole foul calls changed the complexion of the game. But still, like they got so close to beating that game that it came down to foul calls, and the reason for that was because they played at such a slower pace. Like I don't have a statistic on it now, but I'm fairly certain that the Warriors' winning percentage is much lower when the score is under 100 points.
Yeah, definitely. And like obviously, yeah, just playing at a slower pace isn't going to guarantee you a win against the Warriors, but it's going to give you a lot better chance than if you're going to go into a finals like Cleveland and say, no, we're just going to outrun them and only get one game off them in the series.
Yeah, and in 2016, like playing at a slower pace helped them. Like throughout, like this is the difference to me, right? That changed the complexion of the 2017 NBA Finals versus the 2016 NBA Finals. Going into the 2016 playoffs, Cleveland was only allowing 98 points per game, which is really good. Like that's a really good defense.
Yeah.
98 points per 100 possessions. And then in the year after, I don't know what their statistic was, but it was like maybe it was like 108 points per 100 possessions. Like their defense fell a lot, and they went from being a top 5 defense in 2016 to being a bottom 8 defense in 2017. So like the difference is right there. Like I believe that in 2017, I don't think the difference to me wasn't the fact that the Warriors added Kevin Durant. The difference to me because the difference to me was Cleveland's drop off defensively because like Kevin Durant at the end of the day, while he like at the end of the day you can only bring production, right? Like so Kevin Durant being a 25 point per game scorer last year, if you add up all the players that they lost, like that's probably equivalent to 25 points per game. Like Harrison Barnes was averaging like 14, and then they lost. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they lost some player. Like they lost Bogut that year. They lost Leandro Barbosa that year. Like their team
Marquise
wasn't
Chris.
exactly the same. Sorry,
Marquise Chris.
you mean Maurice Spates?
Oh shoot.
Yeah.
Wrong Suns.
Marquise Chris is on the Sun, but yeah, more Maurice Spates. Yeah, like players like that. Like overall, like to me, it was like I'm not saying that Cleveland would have won the series if they were a better defensive team necessarily, but that series probably would have been 7 games if Cleveland was still a top 5 defense.
Yeah, and that's the real concern this year is that they're not good defensively. But
Yeah.
I do find it interesting that like the Grizzlies were able to even have as much success in the playoffs as they were with their style because you would think that it wouldn't work as well in the playoffs as in the regular season just because every team is going to be slowing down the pace at least somewhat is going to be
Yeah.
playing closer to them, but maybe it's just the fact that they were more used to playing that style that they
Exactly. I think that's what it was too. Like when you like for a Golden State, right, to go from a team that's scoring 120 points every 100 possessions, dropping to like 100, right? Like that's much easier for the Grizzlies to drop from like 98 points per 100 possessions to like 95. Like the drop, like they were so used to it that like come playoff time, they were probably one of the few teams that had to make any adjustments to the way that they played because they played with a defensive mentality and like grind it out, like slow it down, like we're gonna play all 48 minutes, that kind of thing. Like the Grizzlies were never one of those teams that was like we're gonna play all our stars 33 minutes and we're gonna be up by 20 in the fourth quarter and then rest all of them so they don't have to play. Like the Grizzlies were not like that. They were like they play the full game, they play all the way through, they win by sometimes big margins if their defense just completely shook up the other team, but most of the time they'd win close games and it would always come down to that. So like honestly, like to me, if you had gotten the Grizzlies in like in those years when they were really good, when like Marc Gasol was the defensive player of the year, if you had gotten them some 3-point snipers and a really good playmaker, and then maybe like one guy who could really hit clutch shots, that team was perfectly poised to make a deep run because I remember there was one year when they were in the conference finals and they ended up losing to the Spurs. I think it was 2014 actually. Like, can you imagine if the Grizzlies had played the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals? That would have
Oh,
been insane.
that would have been the best finals ever or something.
Like
Jeez.
it would have been crazy to see because like that was the one year where Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade were really nothing. So it'd be basically LeBron James trying to fight a complete grinded out defense, which you know historically doesn't really work that well for him when he played the Spurs in 2007 or whatever. But still, like I mean, we could have seen so many cool things. We could see so many more cool things if the league was the way that it was a couple years ago.
Yeah, and like I don't watch NBA regular season basketball. I just don't. But even just watching the playoffs and like just trying to watch every game, and then suddenly like a Grizzlies game comes on, I'm like, that's so refreshing. I just got off of watching like the last Mavericks Rockets series and just seeing all the freeze going down. Now I get to see nice refreshing Spurs Grizzlies game. I get to see a nice 85 to 83 game, and I get to see Marc Gasol just punching everybody in the post, and Zebo getting all the rebounds, and Mike Conley and Tony Allen locking down the perimeter. This is different, and you know what? I'm ready for different after watching all these NBA games. And
Yeah,
it's so important, especially like this isn't the NFL where like you can watch literally every game in the season if you wanted to, but even if not, like you only have 16 games in the season. You're gonna get bored if you're a really committed fan like the NBA expects you to be, having 82 games in a season. Like it gets boring after a while watching the same game play out every single time, just with different teams. Like nobody wants to see the Brooklyn Nets do their rendition of the Golden State Warriors, throwing up all the frees, or like every other tanking team doing the exact same thing. And nobody wants to see the Suns do it when they can watch the Golden State Warriors do it. You've got to create your own niche for like how you're playing the game, and unfortunately, it takes a lot of risk to do that kind of thing. But I mean, look how much it benefited the Pacers. Look how much it benefited the Grizzlies in the past. Look how much it benefited the mid 2000s Spurs. Like I mean, it's just something the NBA is moving away from right now, and I suppose we'll have to wait a couple more years for Stephen Curry to drop off a little bit. But I suppose we should enjoy it while it's happening.
yeah. I mean, I think that like it's just I agree with what you said. It's just the reason, like one of the reasons that I have such an issue with the way that the game is played now is like I've tried so many times to watch Warriors games, and then it'll be close in the first half, and then in the third quarter they'll score 40, and then they'll win by 20, and it's literally all predicated on the fact that they just run and shoot a bunch of threes,
Yeah.
and no team has any answer to how to stop that because they just play the same way and they can't play as well as they can, so they end up losing.
Yeah, and like those kinds of games are pretty boring. And like the NBA was designed around scoring about 100 points. That's why they chose a 24-second shot clock, and literally so that if you had like a 50% field goal percentage, you would score about 100 points. And
And I saw a statistic earlier today. I don't know where it was, but it was just asking about like it was like is this the best offensive like is this the best offense in NBA history? Because like the combined like the average of every team in the league is like 110 points per game and like 54% field goal shooting or something like that. And some other statistic about like per 36 or per 100 possessions or something. And basically, like my answer to that was no. Like this isn't the best offense we've seen in the NBA. It's just the worst defense because everyone like it's less about like what like I can't think of like you said earlier. They're probably like if I'm trying to think of a defensive minded team, I can probably think of like five, and three of them aren't good. Like the only two good ones, the only three good ones I would say are Indiana, Boston, and the Jazz.
yeah, like I mean, the Jazz really are the only like really defensive minded team right now. Like the Celtics technically are, but like that's just so far out of what their public perception has been.
It's out of necessity, really. It's not really because of that's how they play. It's just because they don't have enough offense, so they have to be defensive minded. Like, I guarantee next season when they have Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and all their pieces back, and they probably get another couple pieces in the offseason, next year they're probably going to be just like everyone else and shoot a bunch of threes and just be like a 110 points per game team.
Oh yeah, and maybe that's why Brad Stevens should be talked about more for Coach of the Year. The fact that he's just doing a completely different scheme than what he's comfortable with, just to make his team better.
Yeah, I mean he is like that, and like that's another thing that I liked about Terry Stotts. The one year that you and I were really rooting for him in 2016, he
Yeah.
was playing at a slower pace. Like they were consistently winning games in the low hundreds and sometimes high 90s rather than going all out like 120. All that now that's definitely what they do, and I just think it's interesting to see. Like while you and I have been in high school, like we've literally seen how much the game has changed to how many teams there were just. They were like maybe when you and I started talking about basketball, like sophomore year, late freshman year, whatever it was, like back then there were probably maybe like half the teams were shooting the way like that they are now, but now it's like 25 of them, like and like soon like it's probably going to be all of them, and I don't think that's I like what I was saying earlier about the whole thing about like you need someone to change it to be about defense or passing or something. Like it's probably going to be like this for the foreseeable future because like given I guess the only way that it could really, I mean, maybe like this is so far out of reach, but like if LeBron, like let's say LeBron James went to San Antonio and they just played at a completely slow, grinded out pace because LeBron knew that was the only way to beat Houston and Golden State, then I guess maybe you'd probably see some teams like try and take that approach. But like even the Philadelphia 76ers probably only have like 2, 3 really good shooters, but they still try and shoot a bunch of threes.
Yeah. And like it's a problem that every team wants to do what the Golden State Warriors do, regardless of their personnel, regardless of what their coach thinks originally, regardless of what the owner thinks. It's just everyone's like,
Yeah.
we've got to do what the winner does, and that's how the NBA has always worked. It's always been well, that's how sports always work in general. It's always trying to chase down the front runner, and then some team that's doing something completely different actually becomes the new front runner, and then it's chase the new front runner, and it's just
Yeah. And I think Houston's downfall, if Houston ends up having a downfall this season, I personally don't think they will. I think they're probably gonna. Like if I like I hope that they'll be in the NBA Finals. I'm not entirely. It depends on Golden State's health.
yeah,
But like if the conference final started today, obviously I would pick the Rockets. But like if the Rockets end up having any downfall, I think it's ultimately going to be that they tried to beat the Warriors at their own game.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, I feel like if the Warriors really wanted to, and they just like the Warriors, like they score 121 points per game, and their stars only play like 33 minutes a game. So like there's no doubt in my mind that if the Warriors were all clicking on all cylinders, could probably end up getting like 140 points a game. Obviously, maybe not in the playoffs, but still, they could get the totals really high because they're like I said earlier, they have an embarrassment of riches. Kevin Durant can shoot, Steph Curry can shoot, Draymond Green can shoot sometimes, Klay Thompson can shoot, Nick Young can shoot, Omri Caspi can shoot, Andre Iguodala when he's clicking can shoot. And that's not even everyone on the roster. David West can make a mid-range jump shot, not necessarily a three.
yeah.
Quinn Cook can shoot. Like I can't think of everyone on the roster, but regardless, like at the end of the day, like I think like Houston tried to take this approach to building the perfect team for the NBA now, which is threes and layups, bunch of shooters, 2 playmakers, perfect point guard play for 48 minutes, and good solid perimeter defenders. But like Houston shoots 51 threes a game.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Like that's
And like it's not even fun to watch at some point.
yeah, like threes, layups, and like on it, like they shoot more threes than like oh my gosh, like I don't know how many shots on average a team that I think on average I think a team attempts like 80 shots a game maybe something like that, but like 50 of them are threes, like wow, like that's just insane.
No, absolutely, and like it just be at some point you need sports are exciting when the unexpected occurs, and I mean if the Rockets just roll through the playoffs the whole way just by shooting threes, and like if what if they just swept every team and they just beat them all by 20 points, and then Daryl Morey came on, he's like, well, we took more threes, and obviously that was the more proper strategy, and that's why we won 20 by 20 points every game. And you guys shouldn't be surprised because the math says that this should have worked. Like that,
Yep.
that's not what makes sports fun ultimately, and that's not good for the league to just have everything converge to one play style and have everything devolve into just doing the most optimum strategy every time. Because frankly, efficiency is boring at some points. Yeah, like even I know that. Like someone who's absolutely obsessed with doing everything the most efficient way possible, it gets boring. And like
Yeah,
it's a lot more fun to be spontaneous and do the unexpected and watch the unexpected. And
like if this league didn't have if this league currently did not have Joel Embiid, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Davis, DeMarcus Cousins, and Ben Simmons, I would be extremely worried
Yeah.
because without like those players, in my opinion, will probably be like they'll be the next generation, and I don't think of any one of those players as being 3 point centric players. Like they can all shoot threes, but it's like their first choice on offense is never going to be to shoot a three, except maybe Joel Embiid sometimes. But or maybe even Karl Anthony Towns sometimes. But for the most part, they all play inside the arc. They kind of shoot threes because they know that everyone should be able to shoot threes, except Ben Simmons can't shoot threes, doesn't try. But um, like if it like it could get to a point where like it could like you and I were talking about earlier, like it get to a point like where like people just don't miss, and then like the league, like people just wouldn't even watch the league, right? Like if this continued for like 20 years, like the NBA would be begging for like someone to just come in and completely change it and be like, oh my god, like I don't know, like who knows, like maybe if this kept going for like another 15 years and the league just got ridiculous with it, like maybe they could start putting like a limit on how many threes a game a team can shoot, and then
Yeah.
like I don't even know how you would regulate that, but like whatever, like it could really get out of hand if they don't get it if it's not controlled in some way soon.
Yeah, and like it seems like for the most part the NBA solves this problem by making a big rule change. But I mean, what rule change can they make at this point? Like the only one that people even talk about is like a 4 point shot, but that just seems like it's moving in the wrong direction.
It would exactly like it would literally be more like because at that point you would be giving an advantage to like five players, maybe five. Like you'd be giving an advantage to Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, and I don't even know. I can't even name three other players who have the range of those two players. Like I
Yeah,
know players who can shoot really well, but I just don't know. I don't know many players who can shoot from that far. So like it's insane. Like something needs to happen to, and like this is another interesting thing that I was listening to a couple of days ago, and it was talking about how LeBron James, when he was like 10 years ago in 2009, right, and like around that time,
yeah,
he was playing with a supporting cast even worse than the one that he has now, and his teams then were able to win 66 games and then 61 games in consecutive seasons. But now, even though he's playing with a better supporting cast, he's probably only going to end up winning around 49, maybe 50. And a lot, many of those games are attributed to the lack of defense. But an NBA analyst pointed out that a lot of that is centered around the fact that LeBron can't do as much to carry a team because every other team he's playing is playing in threes and not twos. Because when they were all playing in twos, it was easy because like you can facilitate twos because LeBron James is primarily a 2 point scorer, not a 3 point scorer. So he would do that, and then when he would facilitate on shooters on the outside and people cutting to the basket. So it was much easier for him to carry a load when he was combating twos. But now that he's combating threes, it's like anytime LeBron makes a play for two, it's like the other team is down the floor shooting a three, so it's so much more difficult for him to win. So I mean, that's just one example of like how much the NBA has changed in the past 10 years, and like literally like teams that should probably like 10 years ago, this team with LeBron probably would have won like 67, 68 games. But now it's like and you know that it's not any indictment on LeBron and how like because offensively he's just as good as he was then, if not better than he was then.
yeah.
And even though he was better defensively in the regular season then, like it's not like one man's defense is gonna be the difference between like winning 20 more games. So um, yeah, like I just think that what's happening with the league is insane, and at some point there's gonna have to be some sort of handle on it. But if the game does end up getting ruined, I guess we all have one person to blame, and it's Steph Curry. So
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's fascinating that we're this ahead of the curve because I think we're right about this, to be honest. But like the fact that we're calling it right now, like just like practically a year into this trend, like when everybody right now is like, "Ooh, James Harden, ooh, fear the beard," and like, "Oh, look at him, he's running around getting all those 3 point fouls." And like, I think yeah, in like 2 or 3 years, people are just gonna be sick of it, and like the NBA is really gonna start paying for it if they don't, if either like another transcendent player changes the way the game is played, or like something else changes in the league. Like it seems like it's gonna become a real problem, and like I'm a little concerned, to be honest, because like I like the NBA and I want it to be a league where like we can see all these different play styles and like and if you want to play the game a specific way, you can. You're not going to be come in and be told by your coach, no, you have to develop a 3 point shot if you don't have one. You can't be like Giannis and never develop a jump shot because then that's your only criticism that we're going to have for the rest of your life. Or
Yep.
oh, if you're LeBron and like you, I mean, he was never a 3 point shooter when he was younger, but as he got older, he's had to become a 3 point shooter. He's had to conform to what the NBA has wanted to stay relevant. And like that's a sad thing that like you can't have players playing as they want to if they want to stick around. You can't have like an all defensive team where like you're getting like 10 steals a game or whatever, and like everyone's just locking you down because it's just not going to work. And like that's a weird thing.
Yeah, I think it's just like just like so many other things, like just in life in general, like it's just not sustainable.
Yeah,
Like you just can't keep you can't just keep doing this thing where like every single person who's coming into the league knows that like because like at some point in time it's like every team is gonna want to draft everyone because it's like, oh, he can shoot threes, like he should be on the team. Like you shouldn't be able to get drafted into the NBA just because you practice shooting for 15 years. Like it's not. I mean,
like there's more to it than that.
like if a child, if a kid now, right, is like 4 years old, right, and he's like watching basketball and he just like sees all these things shooting threes, and like his parent is some sort of like, oh, my kid needs to go to the league. Like, what is his parent going to do? His parent's going to say, come outside and let's just shoot a bunch of jump shots. You're going to become an amazing shooter and you're going to make it to the league because that's what they care about now. Like, there's you don't have to be that skilled. Like, you don't have to be able to do like all these others. Like, I don't think that like Steph Curry, don't get me wrong, is an amazing player, but he's not nearly as versatile as some of the other players in the league. Like he's not the same driving to the rim as Kyrie, James Harden, LeBron. Like he's not. He's not as physical as a player as like a Mike Conley or like like or a Patrick Beverly. Like his thing is shooting. Like Steph Curry without his shooting ability is like he's a he's a good point guard. Like he's not transcendent. He's not like I wouldn't even say he's a great point guard without like because his shooting ability is what changes the offense and it's what stretches the defense so far out. Like you have to pick him up as soon as he crosses half court. Like like he's not really like Steph Curry can't kill you in more way than one. Like even if when Steph Curry has an off shooting night, he's not going to hurt you. And like that's just the simple truth. Like Steph Curry is never going to be one of those guys who can kill you with his passing and go for 20 assists. Like he's not that player. Like I think his career high is like 11 or maybe it's 12. But like and he's not going to consistently drive to the rim because he's not a physical player. He's not going to be able to take the abuse for an entire game like that. Like I remember in 2016 when he won the MVP, he was attempting I think 20 shots a game or 19 shots a game, and he was attempting 11 threes a game. So like he only ends up shooting like 8 2-pointers a game. So I mean, it is what it is. Like
Yeah.
at some point, like I just feel like it's sort of it's setting in the wrong direction in so many ways because it's gearing young kids who want to end up playing one way. It's gearing all the NBA teams right now towards playing one way. And like if you develop so much around one thing, I feel like it's just gonna result in a deterioration of everything else.
Yeah.
Like we're probably not like because of what's happening right now, we're not gonna see another player like LeBron James for a very long time. Because I think at some point, Ben Simmons and Giannis Antetokounmpo, even though they feel like right now it's fine, whatever, they're so young. When it gets to the point where they really want to win championships and stuff, I think they're both going to realize, like, damn, I have to develop a 3 point shot or else it's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the thing is, Stephen Curry's not the problem. It's the Chris Middletons, the Klay Thompsons, the Bradley Beals, the Trevor Ariza's, the Ryan Andersons, the power forwards out on the 3 point line, the stretch fives, the centers that are trying to shoot the threes. It's all of these other role players and like every other player that's trying to shoot a free constantly that's the problem. And
Like, I agree. Yeah, it's like Steph Curry. Like Steph Curry did. Like he kind of made that happen as he went along. It's like, but like all these other guys, exactly like what you're saying, right? Like dude, like Klay Thompson, man. Like you got into the NBA because you got into the NBA. You don't have to play like Steph Curry all of a sudden. Ryan Anderson, you got into the league because you got into the league. You don't need to all of a sudden play like Steph Curry. Like and all these other like it's just at the end of the day, I don't feel like you can be that successful if you're just doing something because of the way someone else did it. Like Kobe Bryant, for example, right? Like I think everybody feels like Kobe Bryant could have possibly done more, but I feel he was. I personally feel like Kobe Bryant was extremely limited by the fact that he literally just tried to look at a model of success in Michael Jordan and copy it. Because if you look at someone who's doing something perfectly or close to perfectly, you're not going to be able to replicate it just as perfectly as they did. Like
Exactly.
it's not going to work.
And that's our argument. That's what our arguments for like the LeBron James Michael Jordan thing always comes down to. It's that like people want to see, like I don't even know what people want sometimes, but like that just like they want to see perfection replicated over and over, but they define perfection in a very specific way, and you can't do that. Perfection comes in all forms, and like ultimately there is no perfection. So like you just have to be willing to accept whatever is new, and just jump onto it, and like accept diversity in the way the game is played instead of ridiculing these players who play it differently. You have to be willing to scheme around players like Jason Kidd did with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and not kicking him out of the league when his scheme is going for a rough patch because he's working against literally the entire league. Like you can't be firing coaches like what's his name? Who was the Grizzlies coach that they fired?
Dave Fizdale.
Yeah, you can not firing Dave Fizdale when his team is going for a rough patch just because it's and they've retooled their team and they're trying to keep a play style that is clearly not that is going against what every other NBA team is. It takes time to like you have to be patient with like these kinds of things, and unfortunately, the NBA is a money making industry, and as it has to be, and it just feels like it's becoming more and more mathematically driven. And I love math just as much as the next guy, but I'm not watching sports to get a lesson on efficiency. I'm watching sports to be entertained, and it's not entertaining to watch the same thing regardless of what's of the 15 games a night that I tune on.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, so I think that pretty much summarizes our thinking. I was looking over the schedule, and it seems like we're going to have recording on either the 7th or the 8th, and then we're going to have our playoff one right in like the night before the playoffs start. So, so I'm going to save that stuff that I had for today for then. We're going to get in a big long discussion about Tim Donaghy, and
okay,
it's going to be great, and a bunch of other great stuff. So if you guys are as excited as I am to continue this conversation next week or whenever the heck it wants to happen, make sure to leave us a review on iTunes saying so. Make sure to give us a 5-star review. I'm sure we appreciate it. Well, I'm telling you, I do. I hope Aradh does. And
yes.
You know what? Go give us a subscribe on YouTube as well. That's going pretty well. Ring the bell. Give us a comment. Do whatever you want. And you know what? We're going to see you next time, okay? Stay cool. Keep enjoying the NBA, even if we struggle a little more too after today. And yeah, it's playoff season, buddy.